Hi, I'm Case Lowe, co-host of the Open the Voice Gate podcast. The one question I'm constantly asked when it comes to Dragon Gate is how do I get into the promotion? Well, stop asking and start listening to the Open the Voice Gate podcast, released every Wednesday on the Voices of Wrestling podcasting network. For exclusive news and show reviews, look no further than the leader in Dragon Gate coverage, Open the Voice Gate.
Hey kids, Jeff Hawkins from Shake Them Ropes here, and for almost 15 years we have been part of Voices of Wrestling. Myself and Chris Novembrino give a review of that week's news, the lazy river of wrestling criticism of that week's WWE and AEW, and then Vader Club, where we watch something from one of our past, or something we may have missed. Smart, snarky, and sometimes serious, but not always. That's us, and if that's your vibe, we'd love to have you listen to Shake Them Ropes every week on the Voices of Wrestling podcasting network.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, as always, Jesse Collings, and joining me once again for our annual Wrestling Observer newsletter Hall of Fame discussion show, it's Adam Berger. Adam, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here for Hall of Fame season. A lot of new names on the ballot and some interesting results from last year that kind of shape up the discussion for this year.
Yeah, I find this year's discussion really interesting because in large way that's because of the results from last year, particularly in both the modern US and the Japan categories. I think we're in a spot right now where I think it might be a while before we get some inductions. Like, it would not shock me if nobody gets inducted this year. There are a few people that I think will have a pretty good chance of getting inducted, but I think this is going to be like a slow process over the next few years in terms of looking at candidates who are going to eventually get inducted. I think over the last 4 or 5 years, the body as a whole has cleaned up on a lot of different people, and we're now left with some, I don't even want to say not as strong candidates, because I think there's some strong candidates, but some not as universally evaluated candidates. And I think that is going to be interesting to see how the voting plays out over the next few years. We're also talking about a lot of people that are very, very much still in the peak of their career. So a lot of things could change over the next few years too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of people who are still active. So that always changes perspective based on, did they have a good year recently or a bad year recently? Like now maybe that shouldn't influence the voters as much as it does, but hey, we're all human and recency bias with different things. So we
Yeah.
do get influenced by that.
And in regards to that, I personally, and I'll be interested in seeing where you come down on this, I kind of view the Hall of Fame as like an accumulation, pure, like kind of almost like raw accumulation of a case. So it's hard for me for somebody, like if somebody has a bad year that's still active, I don't view that is hurting their case as much as it is, well, they didn't add enough to to sell me on their Hall of Fame candidacy. There maybe are some exceptions to that, but in general, it's hard for me to think of like, oh, say someone had a year where they didn't have a lot of good matches and maybe they were pushed and they didn't draw that well. That doesn't, to me, the way I look at the Hall of Fame, that doesn't really factor into the Hall of Fame too much to me, as much as it is like, well, you had a chance to build your case and some things didn't go your way, so you're still not going to get in.
Yeah, I agree with that conceptually, but then in practice, there's edge. So, yeah, there will always be things like that.
So you think Adam Copeland has hurt his case since last year?
I think with him specifically, and I don't know, it's funny that we just I ended up randomly thinking of that based on what you were saying, but there's always kind of the debate about like, how big of a draw is Edge really? And then his whole comeback run has basically just kind of been not that difference making, which then stands into stark contrast with like, CM Punk's comeback and how much of a difference he made in both WWE and AEW, or even someone like Goldberg, right? Like when he came back, not so much recently, but more in like the, 2016, 2017. time frame. So there's things like that where it's, some guys come back and add quite a bit to their case, and then other guys come back and don't add as much. And it's kind of a contrast, right? And so when you're looking, because all these guys are competing with each other, at least those three names that I just mentioned, like they're competing with each other for votes. So it might not hurt in terms of like actually hurting their case, like in and of itself, but when you have to compare them to other candidates, it's not a positive necessarily.
Yeah, well, in the case of like Adam Copeland, I think we're talking about his run, I think gave us like his run over the last year or two has given us more context to understand like his star power.
Yeah,
Um, in a way, uh,
that's a
as a
better way to phrase it, I think. Yeah.
right, like if you're looking at like especially when we're talking about modern WWE and like kind of who proves to be a draw and who doesn't and how can you evaluate it? Is the brand the draw? All this kind of stuff. Um, it helps to get some more information that kind of shows, all right, well, this guy, jumped to a new company. Did he change business for them? Uh, that's something a little bit simpler than it's like, well, this person came back and then they were working the main event at WrestleMania. So like you can't just like say that basically because of the way business is now. Like, um, I was thinking about this the other day where it's like, we're gonna end up like, 20 or 30 years from now, like we're gonna look at like stadium. I think now we look at stadium shows completely differently than we did previous eras. Like the idea of someone headlining, like if somebody headlined like a 50,000 or even like a 30,000 like stadium show, like they would be either like a slam dunk Hall of Fame person or like just a super strong consideration of it. Maybe the Von Erichs are a good example of this, right? Like the Von Erichs are on this ballot in a large way because they headlined some very successful stadium shows during a time where very few people were running stadium shows, which is the important context of it. And obviously, they were draws throughout the years that they were successfully running those stadium shows. But nonetheless, like the fact that they drew, was like 38,000 people to Texas Stadium for the Parade of Champions. That is a huge accomplishment. But it's like, oh, like Adam Cole headlined a show that drew 81,000 people. And I don't think that's gonna help his Hall of Fame case at all. Um, so the way we view those stadium shows is very different than the way we used to. And I don't think that's wrong. I think we have a lot more context and understanding of what the business is, as opposed to just like someone was so hot that they drew 80,000 fans.
Yeah, with the Cole one specifically, it was also like it was AEW's first time in the
Right.
UK
We
market,
have
which
this whole
was, yeah.
context for understanding like what or who was responsible for drawing that show. It's not necessarily the person in the main event. The same way we know that like WrestleMania, you put that name on the marquee, you're going to draw 50,000 plus fans, kind of regardless of who is in the most important match or main eventing the show. Um, but that makes it interesting. Before we get to that, this is this is the annual show we're going to do. The regular format that we do, which is we're going to be focusing primarily on wrestlers who are either new to this year's ballot or active wrestlers who have had, significant years over the past year and then kind of maybe have changed uh, their case or added to their case, or maybe in some cases, like Adam Copeland, we were talking earlier, took away from their case. So there's no shortage of people that are still active. So we're going to primarily, and we're also going to be focusing on new names to the ballot. There's several, I think, interesting new names to the ballot that I'm sure we can talk about. So because of that, we're going to be focusing primarily on the modern U.S. category and the Japan category. You don't vote Mexico, right, Adam?
I'm gonna vote Mexico this year.
Okay, so Adam is going to vote Mexico this year, so maybe we'll spend a brief time in Mexico. I do not vote in Mexico. Um, I always say this. I'm glad I don't because it'd be too much research, and just like I'm happy to write that off. I also don't vote rest of the world. Are you going to be voting rest of the world this year, Adam?
I will not be. No.
Yes. So no rest of the world ballots, and then of course at the end we'll talk about some of the non-wrestlers. There's several non-wrestlers have been added this year. Really, really fast, I just want to talk about the historical US category. Um, we have one new candidate for historical US last year. Let me just make sure I get this correctly. Um, so last year, wait a minute, where is this? Did we put anyone in last year? We did, didn't we? And so just
From
all.
Johnny Rougeau went
Yeah.
in last year.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm super prepared for this, by the way. Johnny Rougeau went in last year, which was a win for me and all other Johnny. You're a Johnny Rougeau voter, correct?
Oh yeah, of
Yeah.
course, of course.
Yeah. Last year was really productive in terms of like who got in, like on my ballot. It was a very successful ballot, with one notable exception, who we'll get to later. Um, But so we're looking at the U.S. Canada ballot. There are a whopping 20 candidates for the historical era, all of whom are returning ballots except for one person. Last year, JYD was the closest of people who did not get in with 54% of the vote. You, of course, need 60% of the vote to get in. June Byers with 50%, British Bulldogs with 47%, and the Von Erichs with 47% as well. Um, it would seem like JYD's trending to get in. He's been trying to get in for years and years and years. I actually did vote for him for the first time last year. I think I was eventually just worn down by many people's passionate advocacy for him, and I decided to vote for JYD. The one new person on the ballot I do think is an intriguing candidate. I'm going to do more research between now and the submission of my ballots. Uh, and that is Sweet Daddy Siki. Adam, have you done any research or have any thoughts on Sweet Daddy Siki? I have a little bit.
I've started to. I haven't gotten all the way through it yet because we still have a bit of time before the ballots are due. So
Mhm.
he's one of the people I'm researching. I'll just say at first he doesn't totally stand out to me as someone that I'd vote for. But I gotta dig a little bit deeper just to confirm that. But
Yeah.
to
So
kind of take an
Sweet,
initial pass, but that's all.
yeah. So Sweet Daddy Siki is someone who I had. It's one of those guys like I've heard of before, and I could, if you asked me who he was, I'd be like, yeah, he was a star in Stampede in like the 70s. But I didn't really know that much more about him. I knew that he was a heel and he was a black heel, which was pretty rare in that era. And in general, I am more sympathetic towards black wrestlers, especially in the historical category, when we talk about Hall of Fame criteria, because I think it's indisputable that black wrestlers, in often cases, had a much lower ceiling in terms of where they could get pushed, where they would be taken seriously as main eventers, what kind of roles they could have, all of those kind of things. So um, it comes into the evaluation with him. He came up through Texas. He actually was a pretty big star in Texas, which I didn't really know about until I started jumping in because I associate him with Stampede Wrestling in kind of Canada, which is where he would relocate and spend kind of the second half of his career. But he was a fairly big star just going through some of his match data and looking at what kind of programs he was in and was he headlining shows. He seemed to be a pretty consistent headliner, especially in the late 60s in like Houston and San Antonio. Obviously, those were blood territories, and he worked programs with like Irish Danny McShane. Um, and he did some tag work with Abdullah the Butcher and against Abdullah the Butcher. Uh, and then he goes to Canada. He also didn't know this. He also was in 1961, did a number of stuff in New York territory, working for Capital Wrestling, the predecessor to WWE. He worked a program with Buddy Rogers over the world title at that time period. He also was used a lot in tag team wrestling. He, wrestled the Fabulous Kangaroos, tagging with Sailor R. Thomas. And then he goes to Canada, and it was kind of interesting, like when I was looking at like just the match data for his run in Canada and Toronto, it didn't seem like when you're just looking at the cards, you're like, he's not really main eventing a lot of these shows. It doesn't seem like he's like a headlining act. But then when I was reading a lot of stuff and I was reading Greg Oliver, who knows a ton about Sweet Daddy Siki and was friends with him, was reading Greg Oliver's writings on Siki for Slam Wrestling, and he talks a lot about how just, he makes it seem like Siki was like a complete legend in Toronto, and he was well known in the neighborhood and was a huge star. I didn't like necessarily see that in the match data, but I would trust Greg Oliver's like contextual knowledge over just me skimming through Cage Match and some other databases. And then of course he was, well known in Stampede as a heel wrestler. And he also married a white woman, which allegedly like really hurt his bookings. And he basically relocates and permanently wrestles in Canada from like the early 1970s on, in large part due to the reputation that a black man marrying a white woman would have. Um, so just I think he's a really interesting character. I think he's someone that's worth further investigation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I've still got some more research to do on him, and there's not a ton of candidates I'm overly passionate about in
Yeah,
historical.
this
So
is a very
there's
tag
room.
team. It's very tag team heavy. Like in terms of just like a lot of these are tag teams of wrestlers that are already in a tag team, right? We've got Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, and Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon, Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch. Um, and then you got like the Wild Samoans, Gordman and Goliath, Blanchard and Anderson, the Von Erichs, the British Bulldogs. Like it's very tag team heavy, and I just like I say this I don't vote for the tag teams that where one guy is in, the other guy isn't, unless I feel like they as tag team act deserve to get in independently. It's I think we're good on this category in a lot of ways. Like I feel like this is what the historical category should be. It should be mostly, you know, like questionable names. Not no slam dunks, and obviously nobody that should not be on the ballot, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think the only like June Byers is someone that I feel pretty strongly about. She was at 50% last year and has risen quite a bit. So I think the awareness of her has grown. And then she was also in that she was a character in that movie nobody saw, played by Camille. Camille was June Byers in that. And
Are
I
you talking
can't
about
even
the Mildred Burke movie?
yeah, who's the name I can't remember. Queen of the Ring, maybe
Yeah,
something along those
sure.
lines. I did see it. Yeah, Camille was June Byers. So I don't think it was it just didn't paint June in the most sympathetic light. I'll just
Yeah.
say she was definitely the heel of the movie. But yeah, her accomplishments are at least it gets her name out there, and her hopefully like a lot of the voters like research her more because
Yeah.
and from a
The
historical significance perspective, it's pretty impressive what she accomplished.
Yeah, the other guy on here that I think will get a lot of attention or more attention this year will be Cowboy Bob Ellis, who died. I don't actually know if he died this
we
year.
we found out he died. He died like 7 years ago, I think, or something like
Yeah, we
that.
found out that he's actually been dead for a while. But did ren that kind of, and Dave wrote about it, and that kind of renewed, I think, some interest in Cowboy Bob Ellis. Really long time kind of like career babyface. Um, there's some really compelling drawing data with him. Uh, he's someone that I would consider voting for, that maybe historically we have missed. But that's pretty much it for. Do you have anything else to add for historical?
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at historical, there's like I think the other than Cowboy Bob Ellis, who I have voted for in multiple years, he was under 30% last year. I think he was at 28.
Yeah, he would need to have a big jump
Yeah,
to get in.
so I'm not expecting him to get in this year, but I do hope he makes some progress because I've thought for a few years that he's somebody who deserves induction just because he was like an innovator of the cowboy gimmick and he was a draw in a lot of different places for multiple decades.
Hmm.
So he had a very, very impressive career. And then outside of that, like June Byers, like just talking about her, obviously a lot of historical significance. She was a draw as well, but especially being a female draw when she was, rivaling Mildred Burke. I think she definitely warrants induction. And then outside of that, it's all kind of, like JYD and the Von Erichs were like they were top baby faces and it helped their promotions grow at a very rapid rate for a handful of years, but then obviously like their peaks were relatively short, and so that's why some people vote for them and others don't. So I've
Yeah.
voted for them in the past and plan to again, but like if they don't get in, it's not like something I'll be upset about or think there's like some grave injustice. And same thing with the British Bulldogs, who obviously a highly influential tag team and obviously an amazing tag team, especially for their time, but don't have the longevity that a lot of the other tag teams on the ballot have. So that's kind of the strike against them as well. So yeah, it's just interesting that there's a lot of these candidates that definitely inspire a lot of emotion for people who watch them, I think, in real time, and we're big fans of them. But just because they had relatively short peaks, like that's why they're still on the ballot and didn't get voted in years ago.
Yeah, this category feels like it's a combination between two kind of different groups. The first group is um wrestlers who were pretty big stars pre like television era, where we
Yes.
have a lot of wrestlers who, were big stars in like the 50s and 60s and maybe like into the early 70s and maybe their careers start tailing off. So you're talking about like your Wild Bull Currys, we just talked about Sweet Daddy Siki, um, those kind of like Cowboy Bob Allison, a good example, like wrestlers who just like most people just don't know about, basically. Like I kind of know about them because of the Hall of Fame and reading things here and there, but like you're not gonna be able to find that much out about a lot of these guys without doing some deep, heavy research and looking through old newspaper archives and stuff like that. And then the other category would be like really well remembered national like TV stars that did not have really long careers. So that's like your JYD, your Von Erichs, the British Bulldogs, the Hart Foundation, the Iron Sheik, like guys that are wrestlers that are really famous in terms of like well remembered wrestling stars of yesteryear, but have, like you said, like have kind of like noticeable flaws that have prevented them from being super obvious inductees up until this point.
Yeah, and that's a good point about like especially the older candidates like Cowboy Bob Ellis that a lot of people just don't know who they are and they have to research them and learn about them. And that's why, podcasts like this one or a number of other podcasts that talk about the Hall of Fame or people who like do research and write articles, that knowledge accumulates over time. It can take a little while for it to get out there, but that's what happened with Johnny Rougeau. Like he wasn't doing great not that long ago, but then just continually built momentum year over year as people and the voters learned more about him, and then he was able to get in last year. So
Yeah,
interested to see if there's any jumps like that
yeah,
this year.
Johnny Rizgo is a good example of that because we talked about this for the several years when he was not on the ballot or he was not getting in, which was like people just got to know about Johnny Rizzo. Like you look at his like the research and his drawing power and his legacy as a star and all of this stuff, like he's definitely should be in, but we just got to get enough people to know about him. And eventually that happened. That's not the case for like JYD or like the Von
No.
Erichs. Like they're not getting it because people don't know about them. There might be points to their candidacy that people don't maybe fully comprehend or recognize, but it's not because of like, oh man, I don't even know who that is. I'm not even gonna vote for them. Um, Anyway, we'll move on to modern US, where we're going to spend most of our time because of the sheer volume of people that whose careers not just are still active, but like are very much still active, and are many of these people are full-time wrestlers still. Um, so I get we're just gonna go in a so I should say last year, the Young Bucks got in and Roman Reigns got in, so we can not talk about those two wrestlers ever again in the context of the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, which is probably really good for everyone's sanity in the discourse in general.
Agreed. Agreed.
It bothers me a lot that Roman Reigns is in, but
I'm just glad we don't have to talk about him
yeah, you're
anymore.
right. We don't have to talk about that. We don't have to like be like exasperated on why the Young Bucks haven't got in yet. It's done. We're over. We're done. Moving on. Uh, the first person we'll talk about is somebody that I'm sure none of us are tired of talking about. CM Punk. Obviously, I will say that this year was the past year was another in a string of good years in terms of Punk adding to his case as a drawing card. Um, he is maybe not quite as big of a draw as he was when he first returned to WWE, but he still stands out as a top drawing card in a company that is drawing extremely well, especially in terms of live attendance, over the past year. And that can really only help his legacy. I don't think his overall like category one performances have been particularly outstanding in any way in terms of his overall, performance as a wrestler, but certainly the last year has helped his drawing candidacy. And he at 52% last year, he has a good chance of getting in. Him and the guy we'll talk about next, I think, are the two most likely candidates to get in for this year.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, he was in the 40s the past couple years, but now he's jumped up into the 50s last year. So that's
I was surprised he
that's a
didn't
big
get
jump.
in. Were you surprised he didn't get in last year?
Surprised. I'm never surprised when people like don't vote for Punk because he is a rather polarizing individual.
But then
So
jump back to WWE and a clear, a lot of clear metrics that show, especially his quarter hours when he first came back, like showing that he was still drunk, right? That I thought that would put him over the top. I think like there was some people that were like, oh yeah, he came back to AEW, but that's like small time wrestling. But when he came back to WWE and continued to show his ability as a big drawing card, I thought that would maybe put him over the top, but still waiting. And this is a less crowded year, so hopefully um, he'll go up again. I don't think I'm a Punk voter this year. I don't know. Maybe I'll change my mind again. I've made my feelings on Punk's overall legacy in wrestling pretty clear. Um, but I would definitely like to vote him into the Young Bucks Roman Reigns. Thank God we never have to talk about this guy ever again in terms of the Hall of Fame wing of the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame.
I was hoping he would get in with the Young Bucks because that just would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's when we need a physical Hall of Fame and Hall of Fame speeches and things like that in Cooperstown, like they have in Cooperstown.
Yeah, he one thing to remember though about last year was he was remember he was hurt, he got hurt at the Royal Rumble. So he was around still, but he was out for like the first half of the year, basically. So he finished the year and has wrestled all of 2025. So that makes it, I think that this is when you'll see the jump that gets him over the 60% threshold.
Hmm.
But I think that might have been part of why, like, even though he was a draw in WWE, he'd only kind of wrestled for them for like a couple months, like by the time the voting period rolled around, because he was injured for most of the year. So
Yeah,
he's been healthy. So at least, for the past like over a year now,
yeah.
consistently. So
I'll say this. I find like his work now like really fake and like almost like insulting in regards to like his character in WWE and you know acting like he's having to do all this WWE bullshit and all that things. I don't want to get too far into it. But I will say this about CM Punk. He has been more durable and he has been much more of a team player than I expected him to be when he signed with WWE.
yeah, he always had a lot of like outside of him leaving, I would say he always played ball in WWE. He might have griped about it while he was doing it, but he always kind of went along with what
Yeah.
he was supposed to do
Like
until he
we
quit.
like to joke about Mount Brooks erupting and things like that, and maybe that is still to come. But overall, it's hard to say that he has not been a massive net positive to WWE since coming back.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean they've relied on him quite a bit
I
this
mean,
year.
Raw on Netflix is largely based around CM Punk and like Seth Rollins.
I mean, especially this past month with the AJ Lee return and Becky Lynch getting injected into their program,
Yeah.
like that was the biggest thing WWE had going,
Hmm.
recently. So because there's the strength of that, like he has a lot of, like I always talk about, I brought up earlier with the recency bias, like, he's had a very strong year because he was in that Elimination Chamber main event that was at people forget that was at the whole reason The Rock was there was because they put that in the baseball stadium in Toronto, and Rock they had to bring Rock in to help sell more tickets.
Yeah.
And that did kind of indict people said like, oh, like that means the main event wasn't strong enough. But it's like, well, they ran a stadium for the Elimination Chamber show, like in North
Yeah.
America. Like that's a tough sell for and
Yeah,
like
if you like, oh, they had like, I don't know, let's just, I forget what the numbers are, but let's just say like, oh, they only had 18,000 tickets out. I'm like, well, if they did that in a basketball arena, it would be a massively successful show.
I
So
think they had like 25 and they needed to get
yeah,
it over 30 or something like that. But yeah, it was so like so like that was, a big main event. And then he headlined night one of Mania, which, people say that's not a real Mania main event. And okay, like that's, debatable, but I understand that. But it's still gonna end up being like, the second biggest show of the year,
yeah. I mean, you could
anywhere.
just look. I mean, honestly, you can just look at like, and again, I know WWE's brand is strong. I know all this kind of stuff. We talk about it all the time, but you could just look at what Raw does every week.
Mhm.
Okay, that's they're drawing over 10,000 fans almost every week. Extremely high ticket prices. The people are there in part to see CM Punk and see what he's gonna do and watch him wrestle and chant for him, and all that kind of stuff like that. So,
Yeah, and
um,
I was just gonna add, like the SummerSlam, like moving to 2 nights in a stadium. This is the
mhm.
first year they did that, and I think it's easy to forget. Like there's SummerSlam, like at the end of the pay-per-view era, like it wasn't like it was closer to, in terms of pay-per-view buys, like it was closer to some of those B shows than it was to the Royal
Yeah.
Rumble or WrestleMania. So that's not like this like incredibly strong brand that, automatically could have filled 2 nights in the stadium like Mania. So like that does speak to like how hot they are right now that they're able to do that expansion. And obviously, he was the guy who headlined that, so deserves some credit for that success.
Speaking of other headlining WWX, we have Cody Rhodes. He got 48% of the vote last year. I think a lot of this, you could say a lot of similar things about Cody as you can about Punk in terms of their presence being a major drawing star in WWE during a very successful era. Um, I voted for Cody last year. I will continue to vote for him. I think he is um, one of the, I don't know, five most important wrestlers of the last 10 years. Uh, Maybe higher than that. He, I think, is definitely a Hall of Famer for all of his emergence as a really really top drawing babyface, and kind of like an underrated top drawing babyface, especially when he came back to WWE and he really took off. And I think that there was a lot of credit given to the Bloodline, which not that that wasn't not drawing, but like Cody really was uh, the main draw, and Cody has really been the guy that's taken over John Cena's role in terms of the public face of the company, the guy that's, appearing on stuff and talking and making public appearances and just being the top baby face in the company. I think this year was not as strong as last year, just overall, in terms of like his momentum as a drawing card and with the crowd and things like that. But another really strong year for him that I think will only put him closer to getting in, if not getting in outright.
Yeah, I expect him to go in this year, and he doesn't have the longevity as a headliner that some of the other candidates have, because he didn't really. I mean, he headlined a bit in AEW, but didn't headline a lot of pay-per-views.
Yeah, but he was a huge star in AEW. Like I would
He was.
I would consider him a headliner throughout his time in AEW. I know he did the whole didn't win the world title kind of thing and can't challenge for the world title again and was kind of in the Cody verse, but he was every time I saw him live in AEW, he was one of the most he got the biggest reactions on the show or close to the biggest reactions on the show and um was a huge star. It was almost one of those things that like I don't know if you feel this way, but like at the time was kind of like a little bit of a disconnect where if you were like a long time Ring of Honor fan or New Japan fan in the United States, Cody kind of gets inserted into that scene midway through kind of like peak Bullet Club era. And to me, it was like, oh, Cody's cool, but like I don't like him as much as I like Kenny or the Young Bucks or like Okada or Tanahashi or these other wrestlers. But there was a large segment of fans who maybe were had less experience watching those promotions when Cody came in that were like Cody is their top favorite wrestler. Um, and
Yeah,
I
the
think,
other I was just gonna say the other thing that was interesting about that was Cody was the most aggressive in terms of being anti WWE.
well, yeah, that comes with if Cody comes back to AEW ever, that's something he's going to have to reconcile with because you're 100% correct that Cody, this is why Cody's a worker, right? He's a smart guy. He taught Bryan Danielson how fun lying can be. He wisely positioned himself as the anti-authority. I hate WWE. I'm gonna start a revolution to destroy WWE, and that was a big, big part of his appeal. That he can't lean on even if he does eventually leave WWE and go back to AEW, which is something that I presume could happen in the future.
It's possible. I don't anticipate it because he's such a big star for them, but it's you never know. You never know. It's wrestling, right? Like we never thought CM Punk would go back to WWE,
Mhm.
but he did. So Cody going back to AEW, like who
Yeah,
knows?
not a great year, I think, for Cody as a like in like category one in terms of in-ring wrestling and overall excellence as a pro wrestler.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he did win. I guess I'll just say, like, from a career perspective, like, you could potentially say, like, I don't know if I really think By Cody is like a Hall of Fame level performer. Like, I could see that argument. I could also see an argument that, like, hey, he doesn't have a ton of longevity as a draw necessarily, but I mean, just WWE, like this has been a historically successful period for WWE, and he was at the center of driving that. It wasn't
I
like, oh,
mean,
it's not
his
even arguable. Like he was like the
yeah,
catalyst for that.
yeah, his jump to WWE, I think, really helped redefine um, the public's perception in a lot of ways of WWE. Um,
Well, yeah, because they had built this is the other thing that people forget. Like they had built up that they had invested years of television time into this Roman title reign, but they didn't have anybody to end it. Like they didn't have anybody internal. Like I guess there was an argument for Sami Zayn that you could make, but they were never like really behind Sami. Like that wasn't he got over just kind of accidentally a bit. He got over way more than they anticipated. And to their credit, they went with it. But he was never like the successor to Roman Reigns in terms
they
of
didn't
being
have a
their top
top
guy.
they didn't have a top baby face, period.
No,
Like
exactly.
they had spent all this time making Roman their top baby face, and then Roman goes heel, and you're left with like Drew McIntyre or Jey Uso, um, or eventually Sammy kind of grows into that role, kind of through his storyline. But they did not have that top babyface, that slot that Cody now occupies. And
Yeah,
when he
it
came
was.
in, everything changed. So, he's probably in this in yeah I mean to me he's the strongest candidate in this category. It's either him or Punk. I think if you're just being uh
Yeah, I mean, I expect them both to go in this year, and I mean, they have cases for every single criteria, like
mhm.
both of them. But Cody, I would say, especially for historical significance, because he I mean, he helped start AEW, right? Like
Yep.
and even if
That's a
even if you
Yeah.
say like, okay, maybe he doesn't deserve as much credit as the other guys, then okay, well, he was at least at bare minimum, he was like a driving force behind the All In show, and the All In show was
Yeah. Oh, I
critical
think yeah.
to AEW starting.
That's a whole other aspect of it that I do think he is. Um, it's hard for me to say a wrestler that's like still very much in the prime of their career has had a lot of historical significance, but I do think Cody is a good example of someone who has.
Yeah, and you can't even with like yeah, even though his to run on top in WWE hasn't been that long, it's been so significant
I
from a
mean,
drawing perspective too. It's like
yeah.
he's a draw and he's historically significant. So even if you're low on his work, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And he's still
So,
good. He's still been very good for a long time
mhm.
too. It's not like he's Tiger Jeet Singh out there or anything like
Yeah.
that.
Oh, we'll get to Tiger Jeet Singh. Um, the Yeah, and just in this category, modern US, I do think what's interesting is when you look at this, um, the group here, we are really pretty much fully past, like, there are a few guys still hanging on, but we're kind of like past like the Monday Night War era, and we're now fully in these are wrestlers from the 2000s kind of era for modern US, which feels right. There's one guy on here who I think really stands out in terms of being a modern US candidate that I would
Yep.
say is probably not a modern US candidate, but uh, the criteria and the rules that Dave uses are that. But we'll get to him later. Um, but I think, and because of that, I think we see kind of like a lot of two different types of. I talked about there being kind of two different types of categories in the historical. I think the same is for modern US, in the sense that I think we have, on one hand, we have like big, well-known WWE stars, um, and on the other hand, we have like uh like indie wrestlers that were really important. Uh, and guys who maybe never headlined WrestleMania, but have very strong contributions to wrestling across a long period of time. Uh, and that kind of, going from Punk and Cody Rhodes, who I think are obviously strong, big WWE stars, to the Briscoes, Jay and Mark Briscoe. They are up to 37%. The thing about Jay and Mark Briscoe, who I vote for, and I don't necessarily want to rehash like, oh, their entire, tag team career, because in theory, Adam, in theory, in the way that we are, I think, supposed to interpret this question, Jay and Mark Briscoe are not active wrestlers and did not add or detract anything to their case over the last year. In theory, that's how it should work. So they did not have any tag team matches in 2025. However, Mark Briscoe's current run in AEW is almost certainly helping define how people feel about this tag team as Hall of Fame candidates. Because it is broadcasting that Briscoe energy to a wider audience, even though it is not the tag team, and everyone knows that, Jay has passed away, and this is just Mark's solo career, which we're not really supposed to add to the tag team case, but it's kind of hard to escape the fact that like Mark Briscoe is essentially building the case for their Hall of Fame credibility now as a singles wrestler in AEW.
Yeah, I prefer to. I kind of think of it as he's bringing attention to the tag team. Like he's
Yes, I'm
raising
not saying
his
I don't want to say
profile.
this in a negative way at all,
Yeah,
obviously, but it's interesting in the sense of that it's like their case is still very much being built, despite the fact that, Jay passed away a few years ago.
yeah. It's so like earlier when we were talking about the doing research on some of these older candidates that you hadn't heard of before, right? What's happening with the Briscoes, I think, is people are seeing Mark in AEW, and if they weren't familiar with the tag team, then they're like, "Wow, this Mark Briscoe guy is great. Oh, him and his brother were in this great tag team. All right, I'll go watch some matches." And then it's like, "Wow, they were incredible." And I think I'm interested to see if that helps them this year, if they do jump a bit, or if they still stay around like the 37, 38% that they've been at the past few years. But I Mark raising their profile and more and more fans becoming more familiar with Mark and then checking out the tag team, could lead to some more votes for them. So yeah, very interested to see how that plays out this year.
How do you weigh like Jay's world title run in Ring of Honor? Uh, as do you think that has like do you weigh that having any impact on their status as like a tag team candidates for the Hall of Fame?
I actually think it hurts it a bit because like they just weren't together as much as a tag team during those years, like when he was the world
But
champion.
do you think like him being like what I would consider to be like a successful world champion, like he only is that because of how over the Briscoe brothers got historically in Ring of Honor and that whole angle, like building up to Jay beating Kevin Steen and Scum and all of that stuff was largely because the Briscoe brothers were seen as like the perfect like embodiment of Ring of Honor, the company. Um,
I didn't really like that angle, to be honest. I didn't
oh,
think they. I mean, it was in retrospect, it was
It sounds
cool.
better. It does sound better in
At
hindsight
the
than it kind of came across as shocking at the time
It
when he
was
won the
very
title.
shocking because they didn't build Jay for that spot at all. He just beat him and won.
But it
And it was
felt
like,
right.
yeah, it didn't, it fit with the theme of the storyline that they were doing, but they just hadn't built him for that spot. And Kevin had been a dominant champion for a while. And like he was like the 1A, no doubt about it, top guy and had been for a while there. So when Jay won, what seemed, and it seemed random, a bit random when he won. It was like, whoa, I can't believe this. But then, like to your point, it did fit in with the theme of the feud. But yeah, it was very surprising. But that was
It
a testament to Jay. Like Jay had so much respect that, you know, he made it work. And because he was over, like everybody believed in him, and he was super talented too. And that's the thing with these guys. They were just so talented for so long and had so many different great matches. And obviously, you know, there were reasons why they never left Ring of Honor. And so they really did spend, I mean, they wrestled in some other places here and there, but that was really where they spent their whole career. And it's a shame that, you know, they're just, I just wish they could have been like in AEW at the beginning, and how much they would have stood out then, because man, they were just so great for so long.
Yeah, I find it just them interesting because of both in Jay, we're talking about Jay, but also even like in Mark's career now is really, in some ways they still are a tag team. As weird as that sounds, the way that like Mark is
Yeah.
presented on screen, and his character and his legacy as the Briscoes, like Mark is like wrestling as Mark and as Jay almost um like if you want to compare them to another like some of these other like acts, like I'll throw out like Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch, right? Like Dusty Rhodes being in the tag team like the Texas Outlaws, like that tag team had kind of no like a long-standing legacy in terms of Dusty Rhodes as a wrestler, as a single star, right? Dusty Rhodes is a
Mhm.
completely different character, wrestler, babyface, all that kind of stuff. Um, Kind of has nothing to do with the rest of his career, as opposed to like Mark Briscoe's solo career is very, very, very much tied into him being a tag team wrestler with Jay Briscoe. It makes me think more about like tag teams and singles runs and kind of how that should be considered. And
Yeah,
it's fun.
it's an interesting thing to kind of think about and debate. Like there's to me there's something about brother tag teams that is special and unique, and I can't totally explain why. But I feel like brother tag teams are like they f- they enhance like the wrestlers' legacies and extend them more. Just as an example, like Jack and Jerry Briscoe went into the Hall of Fame. I can't remember
Mhm.
if it was last year or the year before. But like with those brother tag teams, it does like extend like the better brother who was like a big single star. It does seem to like extend their drawing power and their period of relevance because like, oh, they were a top single star. Well, now they can be a top tag team star because, you know, you can't be the top singles guy forever, but then you have this brother tag team and that extends your run, and you know, in terms of being able to be a top guy. Whereas like you look at someone like a tag team like and I guess sometimes some of these tag teams just might be different points in the career, but like, you know, Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, like that was a team that was earlier in Steamboat's career, and then, you know, he went on to bigger and better things, and you know, Jay Youngblood not so much. So like that's more of a chapter in his career, whereas like some of these brother tag teams are more like seem more like they're extending like windows of relevance. Like same thing with Mad Dog and Butcher as well.
Speaking of brother tag teams, the Steiner brothers, they had
Yeah,
32% of the vote. I don't vote for the Steiners, but they have, a dedicated group of people who do vote for them. Obviously, not much changing over the last year with the Steiner brothers. Do you have anything new to add?
the Steiners are, well, if you compare the Steiners and Briscoes, like that's it gets interesting because like the Steiners were, you know, arguably the best tag team of their era, or at least the best American tag team of their era. they overlap with Holy Demon Army, so there's no contest there. But the Steiners were great, and they don't have like the great match catalog that the Briscoe brothers do, but they were, in real time were rated very highly, and they got over everywhere they wrestled: ECW, WCW, WWF, Japan. Like they could go anywhere and work, and people were excited to see them. Obviously, not nearly as much longevity as the Briscoes either, but just to some degree, that's also just kind of a different time and place. So yeah, I don't vote for them because I feel like there are just more candidates that are stronger than them on the ballot. But like if somebody does vote for the Steiner brothers, like in a vacuum, I don't think that's a bad vote or anything. I just think there's stronger candidates on the ballot than them.
Randy Orton, another guy who, again, I think falls into the category of longtime WWE headliner, still sitting at 29%. We talk about Randy Orton every year. You're not going to believe this, Adam, but not much has changed in the Randy Orton case. He got injured. He came back. He's had some mediocre matches. Uh, and that's Randy Orton's
Well,
legacy.
I will just say one thing about Randy Orton is I'm in the process of writing a column about the modern candidates, and so one of the things I'm doing is like counting, all right, how many like pay-per-views did they main event throughout their career from like the major promotions. Randy Orton is at 90
Yeah, I
right
think he's
now.
second only to Triple H.
I think he's past him at this
Oh
point
yeah.
because that's 90 is an insane amount. Like obviously not all of those were great from a business perspective, but it's just a staggering number.
Yeah, so the thing with Randy Orton, and I remember looking at that stat recently when I was writing a column about Randy Orton. And like it goes back to okay, why doesn't Randy Orton have so many great matches if he's like this incredible wrestler? In the big like kind of black mark is like you said, the 90 pay-per-view main events. He has gotten tons of opportunities to have memorable matches on the biggest of stages against some of the most talented people in the world, and he just doesn't have that many memorable matches. Uh, and so in some ways, like 90 is impressive from like a certainly impressive from a longevity perspective. But like it almost works against him in the sense of like you mentioned like the Steiners, right? The Steiners don't have this huge catalog of amazing matches. But a lot of that has to do with like the era, right? The Steiners, especially when they're in the United States, were not really taken seriously as main event wrestlers. A lot of the times, they'd work a pay-per-view and they're working like a 9-minute mid-card match or something like that. Which is different than the Briscoes because they were in Ring of Honor. The Briscoes got plenty of opportunities to work like, this 25 minute long tag team match, the ability to have these really remarkable matches. Randy Orton is not that case. Randy Orton has gotten tons and tons and tons of opportunities to have memorable matches, and he didn't. And so I think that's almost like a black mark against him. And I mean, this is the same year. Like, Adam, do you remember any memorable Randy Orton matches from 2025? He's actually only had 10, so
Wait, was the Gunther match this year or was that last year?
he wrestled Walter last year.
Okay, yeah. And
And
I
that
hated that match. I got angry about it because
that's why I wrote a whole column about. That's when I did the research on the column.
Yeah,
Um,
I think my take on Randy Orton, I'll just say, is like I do not think he is a Hall of Fame level performer. I know like a lot of wrestlers think he's amazing, but I'll just say, as from a fan perspective, the output just is not there. Like just as an example, I probably dropped this stat last year, but I'll share it again. In the Wrestling Observer Award, like top 5 finishes throughout his career, he has 5. Um, in the Wrestling Observer Worst of the Year top 5 finishes, he has 14 for like worst match and worst feud.
yeah, that's
So
bad ratio. Yeah.
yeah, it's not great. And then to your point, like when you talk about like we talked about like he had 90 like pay-per-view main events or like being a primary drawing card on 90 pay-per-views. And obviously he had a lot of matches on TV every week as well. sorting, just looking at like the cage match stats, which isn't the end all be all, but it does kind of give you like a barometer for like how like well someone's work is regarded. He has 30 matches rated over 8 with I'll say a minimum of 20 votes, but 30 over his entire career, which has all been televised
Yeah,
outside of
well,
house shows.
so
So
I have that.
it's not great.
I had that similar data, like so on Cage Match. He has 497 matches on Cage Match that have official ratings, which is a lot. Like I don't know who has the most matches with official ratings, but he
It might be
probably
him.
has close.
Might be
That's
him.
probably close to the record, like, right? Um, and so I had the one instead I had this is from last year, so it might have changed. 32 of those have a rating of 8 or higher. So
Yeah.
32 out of the 497 rated matches have a rating of 8 or higher. To put that into comparison, so John Cena has 41 matches rated 8 or higher. John Cena was famously a bad wrestler. Randy Orton is famously the greatest wrestler in the world. But yet John Cena has more of those matches. And then when you compare them to like people who are considered to be like actually good, it's not even comparison. Bryan Danielson has 187 matches rated 8 or better than Randy Orton. AJ Styles has 103 matches rated 8 or better, and Samoa Joe has 61. So even a guy like Samoa Joe, who's been around about the same period of time, but has had kind of ups and downs and how he was featured in this company and had a lot of injury issues and things like that. Even he has twice as many like really good matches according to Cage Match than Randy Orton.
Yeah, I'll just throw out CM Punk has 48 over 8, and 14 of those are over 9. Randy Orton
Yeah,
only has 2 over 9. The Mick Foley match, obviously, still the best match of his career. And an Elimination Chamber match from 2005. And that's it.
yeah. So none in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know the Mick Foley one is yeah. Oh, the Mick Foley match. Okay, that's one. Um,
Yeah, I mean, that's an awesome match. Like, no, all credit to Randy for that. But that was supposed to be like, that was his breakout match where it's like, wow, this guy's awesome. Like, what's to come? But it was like, no, that was the peak. It didn't get any better than that from a match
so
perspective.
this year, in case you don't remember, he wrestled John Cena for the final time at WWE Backlash.
I did not watch that. I'm not gonna lie.
It
I
had
did
a
not.
three. It got Dave gave it 3 and 2 quarter rating. The
Oof,
Memorial. Yeah,
that's
it's
like
not
a
good scoring.
that's like a 2.
Yeah, it has a 6 on Cage Match. He also famously, partnered with Jelly Roll at SummerSlam and
Oh, I did
wrestled
watch
Drew
that.
McIntyre and Logan Paul.
I did watch that. I'm just gonna say credit to Jelly Roll. Did the job and didn't embarrass himself for a guy who's not an athlete. Like he did about as well as you can do. So I was pleasantly surprised by that. I'll say he took some bumps. That was I did not expect that from Jelly Roll to take that Logan Paul splash through the announce table. That
Look,
was that.
celebrities are way better at wrestling now than they were. They're way better at pretty much all companies are way better at like teaching celebrities how to have a good match.
Yeah, they definitely are a lot better than they used to be.
It
That's
might
for
just
sure.
be that you get celebrities that actually want to be pro wrestlers as opposed to like celebrities who are like doing it for money.
Or promoting something like Jeremy Piven with Summerfest.
Well, they're all promoting something to a degree, but like you get like somebody who like I'll just like say Paul Walter Hauser in like Ring of Honor, like
Oh
clearly
yeah,
wants to be a like wanted to be a pro wrestler, is willing to do a lot of stuff.
that was
Um,
crazy too. Wow.
and
Yeah.
like as opposed to like, yeah, we'll get like Jay Leno, we'll pay Leno a ton of money to be wrestling. Um, Paul Walter Hauser did do the JOB.
Respect the business that
Yeah.
both Paul Walter Hauser and Jelly Roll. Credit to
We
them.
already talked about Edge, and we also got to move this along. So, do you have anything new to say about Edge that we didn't already say?
Nothing more than what I said before.
John Moxley, really interesting, I think, year overall for John Moxley. I would say the first half of this kind of voting window period, it almost lines up perfectly with kind of like the Death Riders and his strong heel turn. With obviously, Wrestle Dream last year, he turns on Bryan Danielson, and they do that whole angle. Um, I think there was a lot of criticism for him during that period. And but things definitely turn around for him in terms of his overall performances. And now I'm hearing some buzz about him. He's gonna get some votes for Wrestler of the Year. Maybe they'll be down ballot, but he's definitely gonna get some. Uh, so it's another strong year for Moxley, I think, all in all. There were some rough patches, but I think the biggest thing you look at is you look at how successful the All In show was in Dallas, and that's a testament to primarily, Hangman Page being over as babyface, but John Moxley also being there as the bully heel character that everyone wanted to see Hangman beat. And that show was hugely successful, in a scale that, AEW had never been able to do before. In the United States also did very well on pay-per-view. So I think this is another stronger for John Moxley. I voted for him last year, so I can't see any reason why I wouldn't vote for him this year. Um, he's someone that's I think I think you can say he's not a Hall of Fame level draw. I think that's an argument you can make. But I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that he is a successful drawing wrestler throughout his career. Um, and he's just I don't know, he's to me this was this is like another, I don't know, seven war season to use a baseball term. We're looking at the Hall of Fame for John.
Sure. So a couple things on Moxley. One thing is he's headlined a lot. Like, I don't think people realize just how much. So yeah, I count like just in terms of counting like how many pay-per-view main events he's had between WWE and AEW, or not necessarily main events, but where you can argue like his match is one of the primary drawing matches for the show. I have him at 39. So that's like the same as Punk and
Hmm.
twice as many as Cody, as an example. So he's headlined a lot, and I think that's actually about the same as Edge, as well. So like people don't think of like Punk and Edge like having like short runs as main eventers or anything like that, and Moxley is right there with them, from a volume perspective. And in terms of AEW, we talked about this last year, I think, but I think he also deserves like some historical significance because he was their top guy during like the first, 6 months they were a promotion, and on TV. And remember, they originally had that ad share TV deal with TNT, but because their ratings were so strong right out of the gate, they got that paying TV deal right before the pandemic started. And him being the top guy and the big star who jumped from WWE, to join the company and really like get a lot of eyeballs on it that maybe didn't know who Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks were. Maybe they just knew Chris Jericho. And it's like, oh, Dean Ambrose is there too. All right, I'll check this out.
Yeah.
So like I
Him
think he
coming out at the end of Double or Nothing, is like arguably like the biggest moment in AEW history in terms
yeah,
of like you had I think a really exciting show as kind of like that was the show everyone was gonna sample for the first time. Uh and again, going back to Cody, that's part of Cody's legacy, right? Cody has this great match with Dustin. It's this really bloody, dramatic match, the exact kind of match that WWE wouldn't give you. Um and you also at the show ends with John Moxley, who everyone recognizes as a big star, coming out and then, brawling with Kenny Omega. And it was like, okay, this wasn't just like a fun night of wrestling. This is a promotion that's going places. Um, how many matches do you think John Moxley has on Cage Match over 8?
ooh, so I did research this with my 20 vote minimum filter though, but
Okay.
I'll let you say the number that
Okay.
you
So
have.
again, Randy Orton had 32.
Yep.
Um, John Moxley has 96.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
and
also checked. I had 11 over 9 within that,
yep,
and
same.
for Dave's 4-star matches, just in terms of like what Dave's ratings are, he has 142, which is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, look, for a guy who I think most people would say is not like the greatest in-ring wrestler. Um, he's got a lot of really, really great matches. I mean, he might very well win match of the year this year.
Yeah.
for the Texas Death Match with Hangman. Um, you
The
know,
other things the other things that just from an in-ring perspective or performance perspective, right? We talk often about like, well, do you like in-ring performance, like is that just matches or do we include like other stuff for of being a pro wrestler and consider that? So,
which
I
you
mean,
should based on the criteria. Just saying.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that's also what I do as well. So he's also been like, one of the best promos in the world
Hmm.
in many years throughout his career. Obviously, a two-time Wrestler of the Year for the Observer Awards, and everybody who's won Wrestler of the Year that's been on the ballot has gotten in eventually. So he won it twice. A number of like top five finishes for best feuds or best interview. He won that best
Hmm.
brawler award a bunch too. So he similar to Cody and Punk, he has arguments for all three criteria
Yeah.
of meeting all three of them. He's a very traditional candidate in that sense. Now he might not be as strong as them, in the you can say like as a draw, or I don't know, maybe you like their work better than his or something, or feel they're more historically significant, but again, he has cases for all three of them, and so that's why I believe he meets the criteria, so that's why I'll be voting for him again this year.
What do you think about him, like from a historical perspective, kind of helping popularize or make more mainstream, like true deathmatch wrestling?
It's something. Part of that stuff's always difficult because you have to kind of see like, is that gonna catch is that going to stand the test of time? Like,
Right.
is that going to catch on and keep going? Like, he's
It's
definitely brought it back for
yeah,
sure.
it's
No
it's
argument
hard it's
there.
hard because WWE does not do that kind of wrestling. So, like for instance, like the Young Bucks and their wrestling style and that kind of fast-paced Dragon Gate, bunch of moves, flippy-doo, super kicks, all that kind of stuff. You can watch almost any WWE show these days and see the Young Bucks influence. Um, Moxley, because of his violence, and kind of using all the props and the weapons and the blood, not every promotion is going to want to do that. But I mean, AEW is, you know, outside of like the absolute craziest stuff in CZW, like the Weed Whacker and things like that, pretty much does like every single super violent thing you can think of in the ring. Like, and those are mostly being done in Moxley matches, right? We've seen fire, we've seen tons of barbed wire and broken glass and guys falling off of stuff and the exploding ring that didn't really explode, but still, um, just like all of this stuff has been largely because this is what Moxley wants to do, and um he is to a lot of people the defining star of that wrestling style. It's him and Onita, right?
Yeah, they're both up there. I mean, I don't know if some fans like, Mick Foley still, or Nick Gage of more recent
Yeah, like I'm sure
vintage, but
like the actual, really hardcore deathmatch fans will, have their own favorites, guys, but in terms of like who is the most famous deathmatch wrestler, who is synonymous with having a crazy match with tons of weapons and stuff like that. Um, it's yeah, I guess you could say Foley. It's just a different era with Foley, and it's a different
sure.
level of violence. I'm like the one person in the world. This is a horrible thing to say. I'm like the one person in the world that wants to see the John Moxley Mick Foley match happen.
Oh man, I was so excited for that when they were teasing it. It was because I was a
Oh,
fan of him. Like, I was a fan of him before he got to
right. That was originally
WWE.
going to be like before he was in the Shield. That was they were teasing that. I want them to do that now, Adam.
Oh no. Have you
Yeah, I know.
seen
That's
Mick lately? Or Mick?
Mick has said he wants to do it. So he
Oh.
said he's gonna try to get in shape to do it. I know it's probably a really bad idea. But if Dory Funk Jr. can have a death match in 2025, Mick Foley probably can. And uh let's not act like they couldn't bluff their way through that.
I'm sure they could. I'm
Mick's
just
just gotta fall down in some thumbtacks. Like we're not asking Mick to run the ropes and do a cartwheel and take a million different bumps. And I think the promos would be excellent and really interesting.
I don't know if I can endorse this, but I'll just say like
You're
it's
probably good to stay away from the endorsement, but everyone that's listening knows deep down that I'm right.
I love Mick too much. He's such a sweet guy. I've met him before. Went to his comedy show, which I will say, like, go to Mick Foley's comedy show if you've never been. It's surprisingly good. Surprisingly good. But yeah, I don't want to see him get hurt anymore. And I am not one of those people that's like wrestling's too dangerous. It's like, hey, these guys have free will, and like, yeah, I don't want to see them kill themselves either, but at the same time, like, they're
Adam, do you know what Mick Foley's last wrestling match is?
oh, is it against Ric Flair and TNA?
No, it's like a Royal Rumble appearance where him and Santino do a thing with
Oh,
like he had the sock and Santino had a had the Cobra.
is his last singles match the TNA Ric Flair won?
Yes.
Okay, okay, because I do remember that. Yeah, yeah. All right.
Anyway,
You know what? You sold me on it. That can't be Mick Foley's last match, so we got to get it. Maybe it needs to be a tag or a six man or something,
that's
but
fine.
we
I
got to,
really just want the promos. Like
yeah, we got to get him a better last match for sure. That's true.
Michael
All right.
Cole was also in that Royal
Oh
Rumble.
God, don't. All right, we need to move on because that
I'm
made
looking
me
at these
sad.
names. This this is some the names in this Royal Rumble. I can't talk about this. Look up the 2012 Royal Rumble if you're interested. But I definitely can't go over all these names. But what a shit roster the company had in 2012 when all these great wrestlers were available and working Ring of Honor. Anyway, we definitely have to move on. Becky Lynch, has been active this year. Has kind of been this whole thing with AJ Lee and Seth Rollins has kind of I think like reinserted her as a main event level performer in WWE. Uh, I wouldn't say she's doing amazing work. I've talked about Becky Lynch before. I do not view her as a Hall of Famer, but some people think that the moments of her peaking, as probably the most popular wrestler in WWE in North America, or at least in the United States, and being the kind of the first woman to really claim that is enough of a historical significance to get her in.
Yeah, I'm not planning on voting for her this year, but I do agree with that, I'll say in general. Because it's not just like obviously her getting as hot as she was with that Ronda program, where that was legitimately WWE's top program, like
At
going
that time,
into
yes.
WrestleMania at that time. So like that's a major accomplishment. So it wasn't like a fake WrestleMania main event where, it's just like, oh, something has to go on last and we just pick this when everything is kind of the same. Like that was the top program at the time, or at least, reasonably close to it, right? Um, but so I see that. And then also that had a big impact on just changing the perception of women's wrestling in the United States, because before that it was, I mean, it's basically just like the divas for the past, what, like 15 to 20 years. And they were a mid-card novelty act, right? And that was everyone talks about the four horsewomen, like they got women's wrestling taken more seriously in WWE in large part because they were able to put on matches and have performances that were just as good as what the best men in WWE were doing at that time. And that wasn't the case before, at least not in the 20 years prior to that. So I do think, and then I think that influenced just interest in women's wrestling across the, US and in North America in general. And that was a big turning point. So I feel like we need to have someone, at least one of the four horsewomen in the Hall of Fame. And Becky certainly has in terms of like the draw, like who was the biggest star and the best draw out of that group, that's her by a mile. But there's someone else that has probably a better in-ring argument for that, which we'll probably talk about soon.
Goldberg, your favorite wrestler. Um, we talk about Goldberg every year. I don't think we need to rehash the Goldberg case. Although
Yeah,
he did retire officially this year.
I do wonder if that's going to help him.
I think
Like,
it's yeah. Well, it didn't. His retirement angle didn't like work like from a business perspective.
Yeah, well, I don't even think that was I feel bad for it. I actually feel bad for him about that because they put him against AEW,
Hmm.
which was a just kind of short-sighted. But anyway, yeah. By the way, Goldberg, how many 4-star matches or ratings over 8 do you think Goldberg has in his career?
Goldberg,
Yeah,
6.
one.
Which one is it? Is it the DDP match?
I think it's different for both of them, but I think it was this. I think Dave's was the Scott Steiner one. There's like a
Yeah,
fall
if
brawl one with Scott
to be
Steiner.
fair, if 2020's Dave was rating out those Goldberg matches in the 90s, we'd have more than one.
That Steiner match was really good. Well, I should also say his match against La Parka is a 5-star match in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, he has the I mean, he has the like I always think of the DDP match is the one that gets like cut off from pay-per-view and they had to show it on Nitro the next night or something, right?
That was great too.
That
But
one's
anyway, yeah, not the strongest in ring performer, and that definitely holds it back a bit.
yeah.
In addition to the lack of longevity.
Yeah. I think last time you were on the show, you referred to Goldberg as like a bazooka, where like he's really powerful, but you can only use him really in one way, and you have to kind of aim it correctly. Like otherwise, there's like no utility there. Um,
Yeah, and then takes a while to reload. He's got to spend some time
yeah.
away.
Matt and Jeff Hardy's still active. I think Jeff Hardy's a more interesting wrestler as a singles wrestler than he is as a tag team with his brother. But I mean, we talk about this every year. I think the case of the Hardys is like, they were, they helped popularize the ladder match and guys falling off ladders through tables, which is a definitely has a lasting legacy in professional wrestling, I would say.
Yeah, they have that. They have some drawing, but it's not
I think
necessarily like
Jeff as an
WWE or
individual,
AEW.
yeah, like Jeff as an individual, I think would be a much more interesting candidate because of his successful singles run in the late 2000s. And
He he was incredibly popular. He was like legitimately like top babyface star. They still had Cena then, but that
yeah,
was he was
he was as
close.
popular as John Cena was like at like in like prime Cena years too.
Yeah, it was very short-lived, but it was incredible. He like fulfilled his potential, like what everyone hoped he could be for like
Yeah.
a couple years there.
Samoa Joe, still active, still doing stuff. I vote for Samoa Joe. My defense of that is Samoa Joe is awesome. Uh, not like a headlining year by any means. I will point out that the Death Rider storyline totally turned around when Samoa Joe got involved, and it was kind of feuding over the trios titles with Samoa Joe and the Ops versus Death Riders. I was at the show where Samoa Joe choked out John Moxley to win the tag team the trios titles on Dynamite. That was a fun live event moment. I think Samoa Joe, if you even just as a one category wrestler, I think has been so outstanding throughout his career that I don't really care that much about his drawing record or his um, historical significance. You could argue about some of those things.
Yeah, I mean, he was arguably the best wrestler in the world for a few years and easily like top 10 for a few
Yep.
more. So it's
Hmm.
just he just had such an incredibly high like in-ring peak where, and
Yeah.
again, remember the criteria is supposed to be like the criteria, like part of one aspect of the criteria doesn't mean more than another. So like we talked about like
Yeah.
Roman Reigns going in, which is primarily off the strength of, like these past few years where he actually
As a
was
drawing
like,
card. Yeah.
yeah, like a sizable drawing card and like during a historically successful time period in WWE. And now he was on top for a long time there, but a lot of those years were not good, and he was a big reason why they weren't good. So, if Roman's getting in primarily on the strength of strength of a few years of being this, incredibly successful draw, I think Joe being like, having a handful of years where he was arguably the absolute best wrestler in the world is, it's just kind of the inverse of that. And
I also
also,
just, well, I was gonna say like I rate him just so highly, just not just in ring, but like just the overall excellence as a performer in pro wrestler. pro
Yeah,
wrestling.
I mean,
Like
he
his
he
charisma, his promos. The guy he reminds me a lot of someone who got in a number of years ago is Minoru Suzuki,
sure.
where it's like this guy, you just kind of put him anywhere and he just gives off this aura of intensity, authenticity, danger. I think you could take Samoa Joe and plop him through any point in the last 150 years of wrestling history, and he would be a headlining act. Which is
Yeah,
not criteria for the Hall of Fame necessarily, but to put in perspective, just like this is somebody who just has consistently given off the authenticity of a top star.
yeah, and it also like we have to talk about the era that he came up in and like that most of his career existed in, which was like, okay, he wasn't someone who was handpicked by WWE
Hmm.
to
He
become
came
a
up in
big
an era,
star.
like the worst era in a lot of ways for him.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But he was, top star in Ring of Honor for a long time. He headlined in Noah. He was a top star in TNA for a number of years. Set their pay-per-view record, right, with Kurt
Hmm.
Angle. Goes to NXT. I love the story about how Triple H signed him to a non-exclusive deal because, and I believe the quote Joe said was, "I'm not going to pay you to train." And then Joe debuts, instantly his merchandise sells out, and he gets a call that's like, all right, hey, we're going to offer you a new deal where you just
Yeah.
work for us. Um, and then obviously, headlines in NXT during one of their most successful periods. I think Nakamura improved on it later, but that was when NXT was doing house shows and doing like a few
Hmm.
thousand people. Like they were doing like AEW numbers now for like NXT house shows back then.
When he
And
was pushed in WWE, he drew business even on the main roster. I remember his program with Brock Lesnar helped
it
pop Raw ratings leading up to, I think, SummerSlam.
Yeah, and I remember there was like the pay-per-view buys for that. Like that was the network era, but they still had more people
Right, you
buying
could still use
pay-per-views
the
then.
pay-per-view buys to track interest. Yeah.
Yeah, and that popped, that show popped. So yeah, he was a headliner in WWE for, not like a super long time, but for about a year or so. He was headlining there. And then AEW, he becomes the world champion there also. He was doing an interview, I can't remember who it was with, but they asked him a question and it was along the lines of, hey, like everyone, like every time you join a company, like no one really brought you in on top, right? You were just cool with whatever role you were given. He's like, he's like, I have confidence in myself. That's how it always works out. And it's true. Like I think Noah might have been the only place that just brought him into headline immediately, but everywhere he worked, he ended up in the main event for a decent amount of time, and
He's
that's
just
that is a testament to his ability.
he's a timeless, like indestructible character. His character has not changed at all throughout his entire career.
Yeah, you called him a great white shark, right? Like he never evolved because he didn't need to evolve.
Yeah. He's just he's yeah, he's just a guy. He's got the most basic name that's also pretty cool. Um and he's basically had the same he doesn't have the dyed hair anymore, but he basically has had the same ring gear and look for his entire pro wrestling career.
He
And
he dropped
he's
the necklace at one point, but yeah, I
yeah,
do miss it though.
the puka shell necklace, yeah.
Yeah, when you
Uh
see that necklace, and if you're like watching an old match and you see the necklace, you're like, oh, I'm in for a good one. Definitely in for a good one
yeah, I mean
here.
like Joe and Kobashi, like that's a match that everyone should watch and like I don't know, like I know it wasn't in front of a stadium-sized crowd, but like you should watch that match and then be like, yeah, I don't think that guy should be in the Hall of Fame. Like,
It just feels incomplete without him, right? Like it just feels like
yeah, and
that
he
guy's
came up
work
like you
needs to be
said,
in there.
he came up in an era that was like the worst era for him to stand out right away because it was an era with one, major wrestling company that had especially during that time period, extremely limited view on who could be a top star. I mean, if you plugged him in any other time period for his like 20s and 30s, his career is probably way more. He's probably a way bigger draw. His drawing case is way better, I think. Um,
Yeah, and then TN he sets their pay-per-view record with Kurt Angle, then they wait 2 more years to give him the title. It's like,
yeah.
what?
And,
Ugh.
like and like it's the US indie scene of the 2000s and there's Brian Danielson is in. Um and some of these other guys are in too. But like that's like extremely, extremely important for wrestling during that era. That should probably be recognized. Um, Moving on, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, the Outsiders. I know you're an Outsiders. I don't say supporter necessarily, but you have done a lot of work regarding the Outsiders. They are probably never going to get it because they're stuck at 21%.
Yeah, it seems very unlikely for them. Just the lack of longevity. They were such massive difference makers, but it's all through a 2-year period, and there were like, bigger stars than
And if
them.
anything, I feel like their reputation is waning. Like they would have got in when more people were like, more voters were like talk still like in like, oh yeah, NWO was the biggest thing ever in wrestling. And I think that sentiment is only going to fade over time.
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, it still is pretty big, but that just might be because
But
I'm a
compared like to
person
where it
of a
was
certain
10
age.
years ago, where like I think we finally I know we haven't moved on from the Attitude Era, but I think we finally have moved on from like almost like a seemingly majority of wrestling fans being like, man, I just wish wrestling was like what it was during the Attitude Era, which was like the default position of a lot of wrestling fans like 2013.
Yeah, I don't anticipate them ever getting in. I think it would be easier to argue for them if like Kevin Nash wasn't also the booker of WCW for a period of time and just burned the place to the ground. So that definitely doesn't help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, hanging on 11%, Trish Stratus. She'll probably get that 11% again, but it won't be from me and it won't be from you.
Yeah, she's going to be a 15-50. She's going to stay on until it's 15-50.
Okay.
She gets
We
11%
have
again.
some new candidates here. I think two candidates that I think are really fascinating. The first is Mercedes Monet. Uh, she is getting on. She is not 35 yet. Um, so she has a chance to become one of the youngest inductees ever, if she were to get in. I don't anticipate her getting in. I don't know if I'll vote for Mercedes. I like Mercedes more as a candidate than Becky Lynch. Um, I think what you say about Becky is true in the sense that I think at her peak she was more popular than Mercedes. I think I would actually argue that maybe Mercedes has more longevity as a like popular main event level act than Becky. Um, and I think more than any of the other women, Mercedes has redefined women's wrestling and a wrestling focused environment in the United States. And she has continued to do that. I think her start in AEW got off to a rocky start, but I think over the last year or so, I think she the standard that she has helped bring to that AEW women's division is really significant. And to be honest, WWE is lacking people that hold the division to a standard the way Monet did.
Yeah, I think as what I said about Becky, I think also applies to Mercedes in a slightly different way. I think they're two sides of the same coin. Becky's, I think they're both historical significance candidates. Like, I don't think either of them are Hall of Fame draws or Hall of Fame performers, just like in terms of those criteria in a vacuum. But in terms of like raising the bar for women's wrestling in the US, Becky doing it from a drawing perspective and Mercedes doing it from an in-ring perspective, it's like there's a lot of historical significance and influence there. And Mercedes has continued to be a great wrestler during her AEW tenure. So it's I think just like the explosion in popularity of women's wrestling and also the ability of the women's wrestlers like over the
Hmm.
past decade. And that's not to say there weren't good or great women's wrestlers before that. Like, Sarah Del Rey was amazing, but unfortunately, she only worked at an indie level. But I guess like having like really high level women's wrestling in the US on a big stage, like that's really something that's only come out over the past decade or so. There's always, some exceptions here and there. They're from
Yeah.
earlier times, but for the
A big
most
thing
part,
with when we're talking historical significance too, and why I think it's really difficult to evaluate that among contemporary wrestlers is also, especially the direction women's wrestling has gone in WWE. It seems to be going when you look at what happens in NXT. It If you were to ask me like who's more important, Becky Lynch or Trish Stratus, for that, I'd almost say Trish Stratus. Um,
Yeah, but I don't think that's, I mean, yeah, I get that there's, like the Dominic Mysterio stuff, right? But I would
It seems
just,
like WWE's women's wrestling is going further back to a level that it wasn't at previously.
I think maybe from a storyline perspective, but then you have, in terms of who they're pushing, though, it's like
I guess that's
Io
fair.
Shirai and
Yeah.
Stephanie Vicaire, right? Like they're not pushing, and Tiffany Stratton even, like she's not great, but she's not awful, right? Like she's good. She can have good matches. Like they haven't completely, like they didn't give the title to
Hmm.
Jade Cargill and just give her a run with it.
Yeah.
So like there is the level in terms of what, even in WWE, like in terms of what fans want from like the top people and top champions, like there is like a work rate element to it. Um, or at least to some degree, right? It's not the same as it is elsewhere, but it still exists, and there's a lot of like really great in-ring wrestlers that WWE pushes because
Hmm.
again, like it's just the fans have learned that yeah, no, the women can be just as great as the men, and so if there's a woman who's just not very good, like we're not going to accept that as them being the top champion.
Yeah. Given that there are a lot of votes in this spot, you get 6 votes, and there's not a lot of strong candidates. I think I can see myself voting for Mercedes, not because I'm a huge advocate for her candidacy, but I do think it's worth keeping her on the ballot uh, over the next few years.
Yeah, I don't plan on voting for her this year, but she is someone that I can see myself voting for her in the
I
future.
think I'm gonna have votes in this category, so it's something
Okay.
I could consider doing.
Okay.
FTR, I think it's too early for FTR. I am a fan of their work, especially over the last 6 months or so, but I don't see them as a Hall of Fame unit yet.
I'm gonna throw out some things with FTR that I think might surprise you a little bit. So
Hmm.
I'm just gonna say um, top five awards finishes for the Wrestling Observer Awards 13 times. So 2016, number two tag team, number five feud of the year versus Ciampa and
Right.
Gargano. 2020, number five feud of the year versus the Young Bucks, number three best tag team, number three match of the year versus the Young Bucks. 2021, number three tag team. 2022, match of the year number two and four, both against the Briscoes.
Hmm.
Number one feud of the year against the Briscoes. Number one tag team overall that year. Number one tag team again in 2023. Number five match of the year against Jay White and Juice Robinson. And then 2024, they were the number three tag team. And I think they're going to be in the top five again this year as well. So they have a lot of high level work in, like Dave for 4+ star matches has them at 79. Cage match has them at 28 over 8, filtered for 20 votes. But then they also have 9 of those are over 9. So they have more longevity and high level work than you think at
Yeah, if you
first.
say that they've been basically a tag team since when, like 2016 in a major wrestling companies.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
that's a pretty long time, like for a tag team run. Like there are plenty of tag team runs, especially in the historical category, that did not have nearly as many years.
I'll put it this way, they're in terms of, and if you just want to look at like their high level years, so let's say like 2020 through 2025 plus like their year in NXT, because they didn't do that much on the main roster in WWE. So,
Mhm.
but that's 7 years, which is essentially like the Steiner brothers' entire run almost. So, in terms of from like a longevity and high level work standpoint, like they're right there with the Steiner brothers. Different time periods, obviously, but when I saw them at the ballot, I kind of had the same reaction you just did initially, like, "Oh no, it's way too early." But then once I started looking into it, I'm like, "Hey, you know what? It's really not. Like, it's fine for them to be on the ballot." But I do agree, like, they're not. There's way too many strong candidates that I don't think I'm not going to be able to vote for them. But if they keep this up for like another, 5 years, then
Having another good year
easily,
this year. Yep.
yeah, easily they could make it eventually.
Yeah, I do think that they might. I think thanks for bringing those statistics up because I think that's higher than I thought in terms of just like when you talk about like these guys have been a really good tag team for a long time, and there's probably not too many, certainly not too many modern tag teams that can claim like a level of consistency over that same time period because of the nature of how scattered tag team wrestling is. Um, I wonder what their legacy would be like if it if the Young Bucks didn't exist.
I think that's what hurts them and the Briscoes is just that the Young Bucks exist and
Yeah.
overshadow them
Well,
both
and
a bit.
I definitely think the Young Bucks' existence has helped FTR in a lot of ways.
That's
Like,
true also, though. That's true.
yeah. Um, Seth Rollins is back on the ballot. He bounced out a couple of years ago. Seth to me has like a is like a diet version of some of these other WWE guys. Um, I'll say Seth, I'm very disappointed in him just overall as a performer over the last 4 or 5 years. I think he at a time had such great in-ring ability, and that's just not there anymore. And it prevents him from having memorable matches where I think that in a way that like I think he has the ability and I think he has the drive, or at least he had the drive to be a really, really great in-ring performer. That person just hasn't existed in a long time. And he's committed to doing this goofy character in WWE, and I'm sure he's made a lot of money, and I'm sure he's very happy. But it's at the expense of someone that I think could have been a Hall of Famer, but just isn't.
He's weird. He's so weird. So okay, I'm gonna throw some stats out
That's the
at
character
you.
he's going for. He's going for being a weirdo.
That
I
is
know you
true.
mean weird as a candidate, but yeah.
He's weird as a candidate. He's definitely a weirdo as a character. But I've mentioned this before. I think he adopted that because the Bray Wyatt Hell in a Cell match like traumatized him so much
So this
that
is a
he
defense mechanism.
well, I think it was like, and I think it was actually him and Becky both did the podcast or the Stone Cold Sessions with Steve Austin, and they both kind of talked about how essentially they became these over the top heels because creative was so bad, and this insulated them from the bad creative so they wouldn't be as damaged by it because they were
Hmm.
these crazy characters. Anyway, it's pretty fascinating. But what I was going to bring up was obviously from a longevity, he's like the next Randy Orton because he has 47 pay-per-views like
Yep.
headlined her. So long time headliner, although also during some a lot of that was during some historically like bad decline periods in WWE business in
Yes.
the
He
2010s.
he is getting the reputation of a guy that when they turn to him, business goes down. That might not always be fair, but it is the reputation that he has. And you could even see that the way that, I mean, I don't really want to hash into like the Netflix data and things like that, whether or not people are watching on Netflix or things like that. There's some indication that it's not going as well as people originally thought it would be. And that hurts
Yeah,
Rollins. It hurts Punk too, if it depends on how you evaluate that stuff.
that stuff's hard because I think some of it's just like I
Yeah,
think
I don't
people
even want
just
to get into it.
overestimate it.
I just
Anyway,
want to point it out as a thing. Yeah.
sure, but what I was gonna add though was I think like this run that he's on right now, like for this year, I think this is like the most successful time on top he's ever
Hmm.
had, and like ever, because like the company's doing really well, and he was a part of it, like in terms of the Mania build, and then he did get hurt, and but now he's like one of the top champions, and things are going well, and the feud with Punk and Becky and AJ was the hottest thing on the last pay-per-view. So it's crazy that for as long as he's been on top, like this could end up being his most successful run. I do think he'll stay on the ballot this time because of that. And also, I just wanted to throw out like from the cage match stuff we were looking at, like Dave has him with 97
Oh
four-star
God.
matches, which is a lot. Cage match over 8, minimum 20 votes, 64. So actually quite a few, with 8 of those being over 9. But then when you look at
Yeah.
like top 5 Observer Award finishes, only 4. 2010 number 2 match of the year versus Davey Richards.
Yeah, I
But
mean, if you're looking at his in-ring stuff, especially if you're looking at like Cage Match, which has, stuff, a lot of that comes from his pre-WWE days. Like
yeah,
he was a pushed commodity in Ring of Honor, and he wrestled a lot of really, really good guys in Ring of Honor in that company. And he, like I said, like he was capable of being on that level. And it's disappointing that I think his career from an in-ring perspective has turned out the way it has, because I think he has really incredible ability, and it has been neutered by this character that he's chosen to play, and just overall WWE's complete lack of focus on in-ring attention.
He has such a weird career
Hmm.
because like and he's such a weird candidate because I can see someone being like, well, he headlined like all these pay-per-views and he has all these great matches, so how is he not a Hall of Famer? And I can also easily understand someone just saying like, absolutely not. Like every time he was on top, like business went down, except for like right now, I guess.
Yeah, and even
And
then, it's like how much of that is Seth is a huge individual
sure.
star, and how much of it is like the company has gone rehabilitated with its fans through a variety of different things, and it's fortuitous now that Seth is getting a huge push. He's kind of always been pushed um, during this time period. But on the flip side, you could say he had bad luck getting pushed at a time where a lot of things beyond his control were happening in the company that hurt its creative ability.
Yeah, so I don't expect him to get anywhere close to getting in. I do expect him to stay on this time because he dropped off immediately the last two times. So I think he'll stay on, and it'll be interesting to see like where he goes from here. But yeah, like if we think the Randy Orton debates are bad, like I think the people who don't like Seth Rollins really do not like Seth Rollins. So that's going to be
Yeah,
interesting.
I mean, the thing with him, oh, I think that Orton, like, there's a lot of similarities in the sense of like he's gonna have real longevity on top, and he's gonna end up having headlined like different stadium shows and things like that. Um, you know, uh, he has better matches than Randy Orton has. A lot of
That
that
is
has to do
true.
with him wrestling in Ring of Honor. But those, it's not like those matches didn't happen. They definitely still exist. Um,
He also
it,
had that Shield run, which was
yep.
that also had a lot of great
I mean, he
matches
had the
in it
Shield
too.
run, but he also has like, he had the Hell in a Cell match with Cody, where Cody, had the torn pec. That's a memorable match that people will remember. He had the WrestleMania main event where he cashed in. That's a memorable match. I don't know if people will like that's like him like a great work. But he also had the triple threat match at the Royal Rumble with Brock Lesnar and John Cena, where I will tell you, Seth Rollins is the guy doing all of the work in that match.
Yes.
Um, so he has these, I mean, he has a match with Nigel I really like, but so he has matches that like I think Randy doesn't in terms of matches that jump out to you. It's like, oh yeah, that was a memorably very good match.
Yeah, Randy just has the McFoley one, so Seth definitely has more than that. But yeah, it's anyway. That's why he's a fascinating candidate because like the stats are there where like you can support him if you want
Yeah, he
to,
has
but
he
then
has the main event from night one, Punk Reigns and Rollins, which people really liked from this
yeah,
year. That was
but that
produced and given to us by Triple H and Lee Fitting. Paul Levesque and Lee Fitting.
good point, good point. When is Lee Fitting getting on the ballot? We'll see.
Don't give Dave any ideas. We had to deal with Stephanie McMahon being on the ballot uh, for a little while.
All right, good point, good point.
Uh, moving on from Seth, Drew McIntyre. Um, I don't see Drew as a strong candidate. Uh, I
I
don't.
did Yeah,
You, you,
I did the ballot podcast to talk about where we talk about the Ryan Nitsky
Nitsky,
Nitsy.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Sorry,
I never
sorry,
pronounce his
Ryan.
name. I apologize,
He's
Ryan.
100% listening too. It's so
Yep.
bad. You just
You
got his
are
name wrong,
you
Adam.
are a great guy and a great host and you have a great show and I'm very apologetic. I can never remember how to pronounce your last name. But yeah, we went in deep on Drew and I think he's got like some people are like, why is he even on the ballot? He's headlined more than you think. The problem is like so much of that was during the pandemic that it's like I don't know how you rate that. Um, Probably not positively.
Yeah,
Um,
he feels like a B-level star for WWE now.
yeah,
Like you can use him they had a main event WrestlePalooza. I know that probably wasn't the most pushed match on the show, but he was, Cody's challenger. But he's not a tippy top guy in WWE right now.
yeah, and it also he's kind of like a B level like top guy, and then he's also kind of like a B level like from a
Yep.
like a work rate performer like overall like he's good he's very good he's just never really been like the absolute best So that is kind of a mix of those two things. But
Yeah.
also he does have some historical significance for his influence on the UK indie scene. He was a part of heating that up and making it as hot as it was. But
Yeah,
it's
especially when he leaves WWE
yes,
and he
yes.
comes back as like a TV star, basically. Yeah, good career, like nothing to be ashamed about. Not a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, like I'm fine with him being on the ballot, but yeah, I don't unless he
Mhm.
has like, another like 5 years of like really high level success, then maybe it's a conversation. But yeah, at this point I don't I expect him to fall off.
Sabu is back on the ballot. Um, Obviously he passed away this past year. Uh, I I'll say right now I'm gonna vote for Sabu. Um, we've talked about this a lot when he died. Uh, I think that I think he's a great example of for starters, I'll say he's a historically significant wrestler. Not just for like ECW and um, crashing through tables and that wrestling style and things like that. But his influence as like this kind of modern era mysterious drawing card that was so prevalent throughout the indies after Sabu and definitely post ECW. Like how many knockoff like, oh, we're gonna bring in this guy who's like never gonna talk and he's just gonna like kick ass. Did you see on the indies like the 2000s? I feel like Chikara brought in one a year, but that was just a whole act that I think everyone has tried to copy. Um, but his wrestling style, I mean, I remember right after he died, I was like watching this they did the New Japan, they did like the cage match between the War Dogs and why am I blanking on their name? Evil's group.
The House of
House
Torture.
of Torture. Yeah. I was
They've o-
hoping that maybe I had forgotten about them. I had inceptioned them away from my mind.
so
Uh
close.
but like they did that match right, and it was just like this is New Japan Pro Wrestling, but it was just guys crashing through tables, and like at one point like Gato jumps off of like the top of the cage, and he crashes and he doesn't go through the table all the way. I'm like, man, that's Sabu's legacy right towards the spot being kind of botched. It happens on every show. It's so that I think is almost enough for him to get in alone. And then you factor in, I think, category A, which is again, we're not talking about in-ring work because I think no one's gonna mistake Sabu for like Ray Stevens or Chris Benoit, or Jushin Liger or any of these like all-time great workers. But I do think that he was an all-time great like overall wrestling performer. I think that he had aura and he had this innate charisma that got people to buy into his act, which was very different than what other people were doing at the time. And I know he lifted a lot of it from his uncle, the Sheik, but also took it to a whole new level, combining, these topes and these innovative wrestling moves and doing all of this stuff. Um, and so I think it just as in terms of excelling as a professional wrestler, I think he checks that box. And then his drawing ability, I mean, you can go back and forth on the drawing ability. Case, I remember, it's kind of like Samoa Joe's drawing ability, where it's like, yeah, he wasn't necessarily like selling out stadiums, but when you put him on the show, people sold more tickets. I remember John Muse after he died, John Muse, who's very in tune with that scene, saying that like the Michigan area indies would double their houses if Sabu was on the show in the early 90s. Like if you were drawing 500 fans, you're drawing 1,000. If you're drawing 250 fans, you're drawing, five or 600. And I think that's something that's probably going to get lost in the discussion, but I think he's a really strong candidate.
He's just so historically significant. Like I don't it's really tough to explain like what it was like seeing Sabu for the first time. Like if you were like a kid or even an adult watching wrestling in the, earlier mid 90s.
Hmm.
The style of wrestling back then, like remember, this is pre like WCW cruiserweights and stuff, right? So your idea of a high flyer is like Sean Waltman, right? Or Brian Pillman, and they could do some like high flying
Yeah.
moves and things, but they
Brad
weren't.
Armstrong, yeah.
Yeah, like that's the type of wrestling that was like more of like the cutting edge wrestling that you were seeing. So then when you see Sabu just, you know, flying around, going through tables and stuff, and just completely fearless and seeming legitimately insane and how he acted, it was just like, what is this? It was just so completely different from anything else that you had seen before. And it just changed everything because just a few years later, then, you know, you look at what WCW and WWF television were, and there was all sorts of tables and weapon shots and different things. And so much of that was because of him. It was there was just like what mainstream wrestling in the US was like before Sabu, and then what it became after Sabu. Like you talked about the Hardy Boys and, you know, innovation with ladder matches, and that is very obviously that's very fair and accurate for them, and, you know, Edge as well. But none of that stuff happens without Sabu coming before at them and, you know, doing all the crazy table spots that he did, or, you know, like the Arabian face busters and stuff with chairs. Like there was just nobody doing anything like that, anything close to that before he started doing it. And then once, you know, he became popular, like everybody started doing it. So it's hard to explain just how influential and impactful he was, like on the entire wrestling world, like if to people who weren't like following it at the time, or, you know, became fans around that time. It was just his impact is just absolutely seismic.
This emerged after he died. Wade Keller had it. That Wade Keller was hosting a radio show uh, in 1993. And you know they're taking call-ins from fans and stuff like that. And it was right after this show that took place in Minneapolis, the NWA Grand Slam show. Um, and Sean Waltman and Sabu had this match, and these people are calling into the show, and they're like, "Oh, I just saw the greatest wrestling match I've ever seen. There was like so many dives out of the ring, and the crowd was going crazy. And then they got back in the ring, and they did another dive. And I mean, it's probably if you watch the match today, you're probably like, oh, it's not like that special of a match. But the raw audio that Wade Keller had is really fascinating because it just shows, again, time and place and why it's important. And why I think it's important that we vote we just talked about a lot of wrestlers who are still active. I think it's important that we have a chance to vote for those people because this stuff gets lost over time. But you go back in the time machine to 1993 and you hear these people talking about seeing Sabu for the first time, and it was really blowing their minds. And that stuff really matters, and it's something that we're gonna lose if we don't. Fortunately, you know, Wade had this archived, you know, audio footage. But outside of like old observers and old torches, we're not gonna have that kind of. We don't have that kind of stuff. And so that's why I think it's just really important to consider these people in their time. Even though I think Sabu's legacy his candidacy has definitely been helped by the fact that we're doing this vote now, because he was one and done, you know, years ago.
Yeah, the only other things I'll throw out are completely agree with all that, but the only I just want to throw out, like in the Observer Awards, he was the number two wrestler of the year in 1994 and number two most outstanding as well. So like the guys who are, you know, the fans who are, you know, reading the Observer and voting in those were just so blown away by him. They just thought he was the absolute best because they had never seen anything like him. So like
Yeah, and
in real time, people were like, "This guy's amazing."
yeah. And it's hard, hard to kind of quantify because for me, he's not the kind of guy that's going to have a bunch of five-star matches and that's going to um I think be remembered as an amazing performer in the sense that we normally think of amazing performers. We usually focus on people that had a bunch of super memorable, amazing matches, or cut a bunch of amazing promos, or drew a ton of money on top. And he doesn't really do any of that necessarily at the rate you would consider a Hall of Famer. But there's just something about him as a character and his legacy as a wrestling star that just makes it seem right. You talked about like the Hall of Fame not feeling complete if Samoa Joe isn't in it. And we talked about this for years, like ECW, which everyone would say is like super influential, really outside of Paul Heyman doesn't have a ton of representation in the Hall of Fame, unless you're talking about
No.
guys like Terry Funk or Mick Foley or these guys that, are in the Hall of Fame, kind of whether or not they worked ECW or not.
Yeah, exactly. And also like, Terry Funk and Mick Foley, like they were notable. I mean, obviously Terry Funk was a Hall of Famer
yeah,
before he ever got to ECW, and Mick Foley was, he was in main events in WCW before he got to ECW. So like he had
yeah.
already made his name there. But like Sabu is what, like when you think of like ECW style, like that's Sabu. Like
hmm
Sabu was who like invented that, and then everyone in ECW ripped him off immediately,
Yes,
which I
he's
don't
on the
think
Mount
he was too.
Rushmore. He's
Yeah.
their Mount Rushmore of uh ECW. Like him and Heyman are the two people that have to be on it, kind of regardless of anyone
Yeah,
else.
yeah,
Um,
and so I think I agree. I think when we talk about like the Hall of Fame and what we want, who needs to be in it, right? We and that's it's laid out in the criteria, right? We want to have the best draws in the Hall of Fame. We want to have the best workers in the Hall of Fame, and we want to have the candidates that were also the most historically significant. And when you look at the impact that Sabu had, I just think it's very difficult to argue that he's not one of the most historically significant wrestlers of his era.
and the last modern candidate, he's technically new to the ballot, but he's really just being shifted over, correct, is Bill Dundee, who is, I would say, not a modern wrestler. It's funny, you have this nice spreadsheet that I've been using, kind of documenting all the recent results and things like that. And you have a column for where a wrestler turned 35. And you look at the modern US, and it's like a lot of mostly guys who turned 35 in the 2000s, and many of whom returned 35 in, like, 2012, 2013. You got someone like Mercedes Monet, who won't be 35 until 2027. And then at the very bottom, you have Bill Dundee, who of course turned 35 in 1978. Um, what were you doing in 1978, Adam?
I was not born and wouldn't be for quite a few years
Yes.
after
My
that.
my parents were graduating high school in 1978.
All right.
In case
All
you're
right.
wondering.
Well,
I don't have a ton to say about but Bill Dundee. I mean, he's regarded as a very good worker, and a significant drawing card in Memphis. Um, but he has never gotten a ton of traction in the Hall of Fame.
he was only on the ballot once before by him. He was on. So what happened was he was on in 2021 and he got
Yeah.
11%. And then he was on, Dave took him off because he put him on with Jerry Lawler as a tag team. And then I think they fell off right away. And now he's back because he never got eliminated as a single. So I don't expect him to do well in modern, but I don't know. Maybe if he goes to historical next year, maybe
He
he'll gain
should
some
be in
traction there.
historical. Like
He
this is
should
like
be.
like I know it's like he must have been wrestling as a full timer after 2000 or 1996, right? That's what or
In
1995.
1995 and 1995 USWA, I guess if you count that as a major
Yeah.
promotion still, but that yeah, I would think by next year he would be moved to
He just
historical.
fits, just like it just looks wrong because you're like
It
we're
does.
talking about Edge and Randy Orton and Samoa Joe and Mercedes Moné. It's like, and Bill Dundee, like it's just like he's from like 5 generations before these guys.
Exactly.
Um, anyway, okay, we're gonna speed this up here. Moving to Japan. So here's what I'll say about Japan. No slam dunks yet. Only one wrestler here, in the way I view things, only one wrestler here that I think would have a case to check the drawing criteria off. That's just me. People might dispute that, but in my opinion, only one wrestler here that really checks that off. Not counting some of these other tag team candidates that I don't want to even get into. Um, so to me, Japan is really fascinating because when we look at these candidates, I think we have some really, really interesting like work candidates, category one, work and excellence as a performer. But we also have people working completely different wrestling styles. So we're gonna get a lot of, I think, very strong opinions from different people based on what kind of wrestling you like. So you're gonna have your Hayabusa people. You're going to have your Yoshiaki Fujiwara people. You're going to have your Miko Satomura people. You're going to have your Zack Sabre Jr. people. And you're going to have your Masakai Mochizuki people. And it kind of depends like what kind of niche of Japanese wrestling you like the most is probably going to be where you stand on those candidates. So to me, it's pretty fascinating. I know you're like the preeminent Hayabusa supporter. And it's looking real good for him because he was 53% last year. Um, we got who'd we get in? We got Shingo last year, right? Everyone-
Shingo and Shima.
Yep. So that I think opens up a real opportunity for Hayabusa. Only 3 votes, which again is it might make things difficult because it's not a huge deep category. Um, but uh, and we have 2 new candidates. And we have several candidates that are still active. But I mean, obviously, I know we don't have to talk too much about Hayabusa. I know you're a huge supporter, and I voted for him uh, the last 2 years, so he'll definitely be getting my vote again. Um, we just talked about historical importance with Sabu. You probably put that Hayabusa in the same category.
Yeah, I mean, Hayabusa is definitely like a historically significant for a variety of reasons. He's part of the Lucharizo influence because
Hmm.
his excursion was in Mexico, right? So obviously he was inspired by Sabu, but then, he spent time in Mexico with Ultimo Dragon and others, and then invented the Phoenix Splash and the Falcon Arrow. Will Ospreay did that tribute for him last year. Another really interesting thing about Hayabusa is that the character is back now,
Yeah,
like
we have a
zero
new
one.
Hayabusa.
There's an obviously Iji Izaki passed away back in 2016, I think. So and was, paralyzed long before that. But there's a new Hayabusa. I don't think anybody knows who he is, but it's fascinating because he doesn't do like new moves. He just does Hayabusa's moves. He does them really well, and he just fits in with modern
Yep.
wrestling, which I think is a testament to how ahead of his time the original Hayabusa was. And then also just, I'm not going to go on too long about him, but I will just say from a drawing standpoint, he did over 50,000 people for Onita's retirement match, but you need a decent opponent to still do that, right? And he was a much better candidate than anyone else that they had. He also then in '96, the FM anniversary show after Onita left, did over 30,000 with Terry Funk against Terry Funk, and I think it was Mr. Pogo. He tagged with God, the guy from ECW who did all the matches with Mike Awesome, whose name escapes me right now. I
Masato
feel awful.
Tanaka.
Masato Tanaka, yeah, right. And then through that second phase, and that was the thing. FMW was built entirely around Onita. So imagine if for 6 years, just he was all the main events were Onita. Even if he lost a main event, he would eventually get his win back. So the entire promotion was built around him. And imagine if AEW was just built around Cody Rhodes for 6 straight years, and then Cody, like Will Ospreay came in, and Cody's like, "All right, I'm going to go do movies now," and then he beat Will Ospreay and left, and then they said, "All right, it's your promotion now, buddy." That's what happened with Hayabusa. But so FMW did decline, and that's kind of the knock against him. But if you view FMW as essentially a startup from like when Onita left, and just look at the next 6 years of its existence, it was the third biggest promotion in Japan while Onita was there, and it remained the third biggest promotion in Japan like over the next 6 years, like until Noah started.
Hmm.
And the whole Japanese wrestling industry during the latter half of the 90s declined. So it wasn't something that was unique to FMW. Like All Japan Women fell off a cliff too. Or actually declined even more than FMW did. So there's just a lot of it was just kind of a period of decline overall for the industry. But again, he had a lot of other like events where he drew like big crowds, like over 10,000. Like Michinoku Pro would bring him in when they did one of their big anniversary shows. Tenru and War brought him in to headline against and for one of their anniversary shows. So he was a very big star and was definitely a draw. And then obviously, if you haven't watched much Hayabusa before, you need to see him and Jinsei Shinzaki's run in the '97 All Japan Tag League. Just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier that like Will Ospreay did tribute stuff to Hayabusa. Will Ospreay's been very open about how much of an influence Hayabusa was on his career, which is impressive given like Will Ospreay was probably like I don't know like what like 4 years old when Hayabusa suffered an
Yeah,
injury.
yeah.
Like so um yeah, I mean he's easily one of the most influential wrestlers from in ring and like just a great wrestler in general. So just those two categories, you can make a case that he has some drawing power. I mean, it's really hard to kind of in modern sense really understand. And as someone that wasn't around at the time, it's hard for me to even understand that. Like how big some of these in what would be considered the indie wrestling promotions were, like FMW in the 90s.
I'll just put it that, well, I wrote a column a few years, I've written several columns about Hayabusa's candidacy over the years, but the one I did, I think back in 2022, um, it compared like FMW during the Hayabusa years to a bunch of other different promotions to see like, okay, it was based on like, the reported attendances over those years. And yeah, a lot of everyone was lying then, right? But everyone kept lying through the next decade.
Yeah.
So I don't think people realize just how big FMW was in relation to other promotions. But again, just as an example, we're talking about like, crediting Moxley and Hangman for getting about 30,000 people at All In this year with, AEW's television distribution and everything. Like Hayabusa did that again and with Terry Funk and Masato
We'll like
Tanaka and Mr.
compare it
Pogo
with
in 96.
yeah, I mean we'll compare that with like what we see Japanese promotions do today.
Yeah.
Like, and I know it's not a great time for the wrestling business in Japan right now, but I mean anyway,
Yeah.
so that's Hayabusa. Zack Sabre Jr., he got 12% last year. This is the first year I will be voting for Zack Sabre Jr. I would have
Oh,
considered it last year, but it was a tough cuts last year with only 3 votes. But I definitely think Zach is going to get my vote. To me, he has been one of the best wrestlers in the world for probably the best 10, at least the last 10 years, maybe even further back. He has been the best wrestler in the world at his style for an extremely long time, and he has the Observer Awards to back that up. And he is also, I don't really know, like he had a successful year in terms of he won world titles. He got like these kayfabe accomplishments. He headlined, the Tokyo Dome show. It's hard for me to say like how much those contribute because I don't think his title reign went well from a drawing perspective, but he's definitely got more of a like kind of a like if you want to compare him to some guys that got in recently, like Tomohiro Ishii, who never really got that kind of level of push, Zach did get that level of push, so that's something. But for me, he's fine as a one category worker. Just his in-ring work alone has been good, and he's been really, really consistent throughout his career too. Um, and with pretty much all of his matches, he rarely lays a dud. Ironically, you could argue that Tokyo Dome match was one of them, but he rarely lays a dud. He doesn't really get injured. He just goes out and he has really high level matches and has done so against a wide variety of opponents. In a promotion that's not always booked super well. So for me, he is someone I'm going to vote for.
Yeah, Zach's someone I'm considering. I'll just be like straight up with this. Hayabusa is the only person in Japan I am definitely voting for.
Hmm.
I could see myself using the other two votes on a few other people. It's possible I might not use either of them though. Like it's where I struggle with a lot of the candidates in Japan right now. Like I'll just say like Zack Sabre Jr., Io Shirai, and Mochizuki, all three of them like excellent wrestlers for a very long period of
Hmm.
time, like over a decade, right? But then I think about like, and none of them are like, but none of them are meeting like the drawing can
Yeah.
category. And from historical significance, it gets like maybe EO develops more of that, or she might have some of it. She might develop more if her run in WWE continues to go really well, or as well as it has been like the last couple of years. Um, but it's tough for me to then compare them to like, like someone like Kenta, who's never been on the ballot, or Marafuji, who has also been great for a really long time, or like Kento Miyahara, who just fell off.
Yeah, that's actually your fault, Adam. I don't want to bring it up. I didn't want to bring it up. You did, but
Fair enough.
last year you told me it was okay to not vote for Kento Miyahara because he'll be back. We'll hope he's back. Kenta hasn't been on the ballot at all, so who
I
knows?
know. I want Kenta to be on eventually as well. But yeah, so it gets tough for me to like differentiate those candidates from each other. So that's where I struggle a bit because they are just primarily work candidates. But like Japan, there's been a number of guys who are really good for a long time. So it's tough for them to kind of stand out from the pack.
We've cleared out a lot of room in Japan.
That is true.
So, which and part of the consequence of that is that we only have 3 votes. So, um, it's easy, I guess, if you're a small hall kind of person, you might pocket all 3 of those. But to me, it's kind of hard to spread them out because you made the same case for Yoshirai. I'm just um, there's elements of uh Yoshirai's work that I really enjoy. I mean, it's not her WWE work. Um,
She has some great matches in WWE though. Like it's impressive how she is still able to pull off like some just incredible performances
yeah.
even within that environment.
Um, I don't to me she doesn't feel like a Hall of Famer. I don't like her that much in the ring, and I don't know that much about her drawing case. Um, so for me she's a no for now. Mochizuki is just I really like especially like the idea of Masakai Mochizuki. Like I like when he throws these kicks and he's got such a fun offense when especially when he's making comebacks, especially during his closing stretches. I hear other people talk about him like he's this indisputably all-time great wrestler, and I want to feel that way about Mochizuki. And he's actually somebody that I spend a lot of time when I'm bored at night or I'm trying to fall asleep or like I'm just like kind of tooling around on YouTube, going back and just typing in like Mochizuki verse and just finding random matches to watch because I want to like him more than I do. Um, this happens sometimes with like musicians too, where like there'll be a musician that like I'll hear somebody and they're just like so passionate about how much they like this musician, and then I'll listen to them and be like, it's okay, but I'm not feeling like this emotional connection with them. And I get like kind of like disappointed. I'm like, I wish I could appreciate them the way that this person appreciates them. And I kind of feel that way with Mochizuki too. Like I really like Mochizuki. Um, but I don't feel about him the way I feel about like Zack as an example. Um,
So like the Mochizuki fans are like the like Fish fans to you.
I was thinking when I was thinking of musicians, I was thinking like Prince.
Oh,
Like I like Prince, okay, but there are people out there that are like Prince is the greatest, and I'm like, I agree that Prince is like really, really talented guy, and I enjoy him, but I don't see him at like that level. That's how I feel about Mochizuki.
that is a way more complimentary comparison than I
Well,
anticipated.
Fish is more like I feel like the culture of Fish and jam bands and that kind of thing.
Sure, sure.
Like
But
it's
they
like
also
I know this guy is really good. I enjoy him. I don't feel, when I watch him, and I've seen a lot of his career. Like I said, he's probably one of my like 5 or 10 most frequently like YouTube search guys just to go and watch some Mochizuki. You can't go wrong with that. Um, but I just don't feel like I'm watching this indisputably all-time great in-ring wrestler, and that's kind of where he needs to be.
yeah.
And you know what? It's actually trickled down to his son too, because I like Mochizuki Jr. fine enough, but I'll hear people like Case talk about like, Mochizuki Jr. and we talk about 30 under 30 and Mochizuki Jr. getting finishing really high, and it's like I like him, but I don't feel like he's like this amazing of a prospect. Um,
Yeah, I
so-
brought this up. I brought this up on the Discord, and so a lot of people are using Ishii, I'll just say, as a precedent
yeah, that's
where
fine.
where it's like, hey, like Ishii got in just based on being an incredible worker for a really long time, and he's not really a Hall of Fame draw. Is he historically significant? I mean, you could make like he's historically significant because he was such a great worker. Like I guess you can kind of try to make that
Yeah.
case, but it's really just like, okay, it's just his work. Like he was such a great worker, that's why he's on. So anytime someone feels really strongly about like someone's work in terms of like how much they love a candidate, then that's going to be like what they say. Like, well, Ishii got in, so this person that I love, who's been great for a really long time, like should also get in. And the point that I made about, and I guess this also applies to Shingo as well, although Shingo was, spent a lot of time on top in Dragon Gate and also had that, pandemic run on top in New Japan as well. But so I guess it applies to Shingo as well. But so you have Shingo and Ishii, and the point that I make about them is they did like Ishii did all of his best work in New Japan, which was the biggest promotion in Japan and was being recognized for it in real time. And same thing with Shingo. When Shingo joined New Japan as well, like it gave a wider audience more of an appreciation for just how great and special he really was. So candidates, especially in Japan, that don't have like that kind of platform to where like the voters or fans were following their careers in real time and rating their careers in real time, like just going back and watching like Mochizuki matches, if a voter, let's say, has never like seen or has only seen like a handful of matches over the years, it's not necessarily going to hit as hard as like watching someone like Shingo or Ishii or Zach actually, as watching their great matches in real time where you're invested in their storylines and you understand the full context. So I'm not saying that like the size of the platform where their careers took place is something that should be taken into account necessarily, like as part of the criteria, because I don't think it should. But just in practice and in execution, like that is going to impact how a lot of voters like are subjectively rating who the strongest candidates are when they're ranking them according to their work.
Mhm. Like you mentioned, Ishii is kind of being a comparison point, and I think that's what makes this Japanese section so interesting in the sense of like I do feel like if you look at Ishii as a standard, it's like Ishii was just this great in-ring wrestler, and so he got in. And I think you could make there are plenty of wrestlers on this category, in this section, that fans will say, "Well, I like this person more than Ishii, or this person's a better
Sure.
wrestler than Ishii." And that's I mean that's why you have a vote. It's subjective taste, right? Part of the reason Dave gave people like you and I and everyone else who votes a ballot is because Dave is asking for our opinion and our taste in a way. Um, and so I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It just and I think because not there's such a diversity of different styles in this Japanese ballot, like I said, you have like Hayabusa, Zack Sabre Jr., Io Shirai, Miko Satomura, Fujiwara, Matsukai Mochizuki. All of these people have their fans out there that be like, oh, that is one of the best wrestlers I've ever seen in my entire life. They all wrestle very differently. Um, and if Ishii was on this ballot, it'd be the same thing. Ishii would be like a perfect person to be on this ballot, to be honest. Um, so that's where I stand on the kind of those things. Um, do you have anyone else in Japan you want to talk about?
I voted for Tiger Jeet Singh last year. I felt horrible about it after, and I don't know what I'm going to do this year because it really, like, if you've ever, like, you talk about regretting not voting for Kento Miyahara, like, that's how I felt about actually voting for Tiger Jeet Singh. So I don't know if I'll vote for him again this year. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, so like Tiger Jeet Singh is a big drawing card. Mainly working with Inoki and Baba, and also drew like in the United States and in Canada too at times. Like, not necessarily limited to Japan, even though he's in the Japan category. Um, like the thing with him is like, so like his work is really bad.
He's the opposite of Mochizuki. Mochizuki is
But
like amazing
he,
work for 20 years, and
yeah.
Tiger Jeet Singh is drawing for over 20 years, but just the dirt worst.
So like the argument would, I guess like the argument would be like, well, his in-ring work is bad, but did he excel in the field of being a pro wrestler? Like, did he have aura and charisma that got people invested in his matches. And does that count? And you could make a case that it does. So like even though he's a terrible worker and like we say he's a terrible wrestler, I think like people need to understand like why he's a bad wrestler. I actually watched quite a bit of him this last week. Because there was some talk about him in the Discord, and I was like, well, let's just watch some Tiger Jeet Singh matches. Like, he's bad in a way that like wrestlers aren't bad anymore. It's kind of specific to like his era and previous eras where like he doesn't take any bumps. He doesn't really do any real offense beyond like really basic heel like cheating shtick. And because of that, like his matches don't really even have that much of a structure. Like he comes out, he cheats, he gets some heat on whoever the babyface he's wrestling, and then the babyface comes back, and it's like this 5 minute match. But there's no like real structure to the match because he's not taking any bumps, he's not doing anything interesting in the ring. He's just kind of like this blob.
At
Uh,
some point, he'll bleed, and early on, he will choke someone with an article of clothing he is wearing.
yeah, it's like a really bad version of Abdul the Butcher.
Yes, that is exactly what it is. Yeah.
Like, and Abdullah's got kind of his own thing. Abdullah has like a more like I don't know, like more like in-ring charisma and physical presence than Singh, so that might be a slight difference. Doesn't have a judo background like Abdullah the Butcher. That's Tiger Jeet
Yeah,
Singh. I
that
don't really
is.
have. I mean, some people have a lot of these people have their advocates. Like, there's a lot of Fujiwara fans out there. There's a lot of Miko Satomura fans that feel really passionate about her role overall in historical significance. In addition to being a very good wrestler, um, I've heard a lot of things about her being like kind of this connective tissue between during like kind of like the dark days of Joshi, like in the early 2000s, and then kind of still being around as Joshi would build back up and certainly become more popular in the United States and the Western audiences than ever was before. Um, but so my stance on this is I think Hayabusa could get in. I'd be surprised if anyone other than Hayabusa got in.
Yeah, I'm in the same place. I hope I'm very hopeful that Hayabusa should get in and will get in. And if you're listening to this right now, vote for Hayabusa. He's the best candidate in the region. But other than him, I don't anticipate anyone else getting in. Just because, like you just brought up, there's a lot of passionate voters about like their candidates that they love specifically,
Mhm.
but they're all so different, and it's really difficult for all of the
Especially
for one
especially
to
with only
stand
three
out.
votes.
Yeah,
Like, if I had like 5 votes, I would be more inclined to like spread out the votes and be like, you know what? I'm not like necessarily a huge fan of like I don't really feel super passionate about Miko Satomura as a candidate, but I've read a lot of people that are, and maybe she is a Hall of Famer, and maybe I'll toss in a vote there. That's sometimes how I vote. But it's tough with the three. Like, you really gotta pick and choose which ones you really liked the most.
it is
Um,
really, and it's really difficult to according to the criteria, like kind of sort out like, okay, this person, I need to rank them over this other person just because like they're all so different, or even if they're
mhm.
similar, like the time periods or the promotions they worked
Yeah.
and different things. It's like, it just makes it really difficult to sort out and rank them.
hmm Real quick, you want to talk about Mexico briefly? Because I'm
Yeah,
not a
so
voter in Mexico, so I
I'm
have no
not.
real thoughts.
This is my first year voting in Mexico, but I'm voting in Mexico because of Gran Hamada. Because
hmm
Gran Hamada is one of the, like we were just talking about, Hayabusa and Sabu. And particularly with Hayabusa, I mentioned he is like part of like one of the Lucharisu innovators because of the time he spent in Mexico and, inventing the Phoenix Splash and
hmm
things like that. Gran Hamada is the inventor of Lucharisu. There's no debate about that. Like it started with him, and just his influence, you can still see his influence today. It is very obvious, like in terms of like the high flying style that we see constantly now. Like so much of that came from him. And he's just someone who, when I talked earlier about Sabu, how we want the most like historically significant and influential wrestlers in the Hall of Fame, Gran Hamada fits that description to a T. So he needs to be in. So that's what's inspired me to vote in Mexico this year. But obviously, I'm doing my research because I don't want to be one of those drive-by voters that
Yeah, just like
screws over
ruin poor
everybody
Doral
else.
Dixon can't get in because Adam
Yes.
drove by to vote only
So
Hamada.
I promise I am voting for Doral Dixon as well. So those are my two that I am definitely voting for. And then I'm researching like, the rest of the candidates right now to figure out who I'll use the third vote on, if anyone. So I'm in the process of doing that right now. But Doral Dixon and Grant Hamada will definitely be getting my votes this year.
Yeah, like I said, I don't follow uh
We could just
that
talk about
much.
Grant Hamada. Have you seen, because he passed away last year,
Yes.
so did you watch any of Grant Hamada after that?
Is there I actually I'm not really that well versed in Grand Hamada history.
Okay.
I know
So,
Case will probably yell at me about that.
so
Or at
I
least
would
send me some links to matches, but um like I mean part of the I mean he also wrestled in Japan. Like how much Grand Hamada tape is there? Is there a lot?
There's quite a bit. Yeah,
Okay.
you can see quite a bit. Yeah, some of it I don't think there's as much there's more of his Japan work than his Mexican work. Like he was a bigger draw in Mexico than he was in Japan.
Yeah, but
Um,
we have way more television of stuff in Japan than we do in
yes.
Mexico. I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons that's kind of held me back from voting in Mexico. Now, obviously, the more contemporary wrestlers, there's plenty of video of, but like it's hard to study up on these guys from an in-ring perspective when it's hard to find tape of these guys. Um, I'm familiar with most of these names. I'm certainly familiar with guys like Volador Jr. And La Parca, or AAA version of La Parca and El Dandy, and these guys. Um, but I mean, I don't have the knowledge to vote in Mexico, nor do I have the knowledge to vote in the rest of the world. Um, I could
My
would it be better for me to find someone that I really trust and then mimic their ballot? Would that be a better use of the Hall of Fame? Maybe, I don't know. Perhaps, but
I would just encourage you to watch Gran Hamada. Like I think and read about because I think Case wrote about him quite a bit.
mhm.
So I would like read that and then if there are
I
some
think I
like
read Case's article on Gran Hamada.
okay.
It was
Yeah,
really long. It might have been in two parts.
it was very long. Yeah, Case did a great job with that. So I would encourage and anyone who's listening, like read that Case article or column about Grant Hamada, and then just find some match recommendations, or if you can find some stuff on YouTube. Just watch him, especially his older work, and just look at like what year this match is in, and then the stuff he's doing. It's he's just amazing. It's just he really is like the innovator of so many things that we see today, and I'm really happy that Dave added him back to the ballot. So we can vote for him and recognize him because he
Mm.
really does deserve it.
Moving on to non-wrestler. Um, we got Bobby Davidson. I got Bobby Davidson. Let's be honest. But Bobby Davis got in, which is great because that not only was that the correct thing, it also opens up another vote. In addition to the regular characters I vote for every year in non-wrestler, it's so difficult to get non-wrestlers in. But we had some people get close in addition to Bobby Davis last year. Bobby Bruns, another strong candidate, he got 56% last year. Um, Interesting, he's in the Japan category, which makes sense. Um, but I don't know if he's always been in Japan. Not that it really matters for non-wrestler, but
I think
um,
he has been since at least since Dave added the clarification of which
yeah.
regions the non-wrestlers were in.
Hmm.
So I think he has been in Japan at
Yeah.
least since that
I mean,
got
I don't
clarified.
need to talk about Bobby Bruns too much, but Bobby Bruns was the essentially the trainer of Ricky Dozen. He was a West Coast wrestling promoter who ended up kind of leading some early expeditions of wrestlers to Japan and ended up training Rikidozan, who was a former sumo wrestler and was kind of like trainer, booker, promoter kind of guy in the very early days of wrestling in Japan. And like pro wrestling might not exist in Japan if it wasn't for Bobby Bruns. Dave always says he's like a super obvious candidate, but he's just one of those people that people don't know. So hopefully this is the year he gets in. He only needs to do a little bit better than he did last year. So maybe a little bit more outreach on Bobby Bruns, and we can get him into the Hall of Fame. Um, and then also coming in close, Ted Turner. He's at 53%. I don't know if Ted Turner will if he's going to keep gaining votes. It's 7% doesn't seem like that much, but it's hard for these non-wrestlers, I think, to build momentum.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I vote for Bobby Bruns and I vote for Ted Turner. So I'm hopeful for both of them. Just for Ted Turner's case, I'll just say like there's a lot of people like, well, he wasn't really that involved in wrestling, right? Like he wasn't running the day to day or anything. So why would you ever vote for him? And the case is just like he was the reason, like his personal interest in wrestling and the loyalty that he felt to it is the reason why WCW ever existed in the first place. It was him starting it and him continuing to fund it even when it was losing money and not a successful part of his business. He just wrestling is so different without him. He's just such a historically significant part of, wrestling in the US and honestly probably around the world, because of like just because WCW existed solely because of him. So
Yeah.
I think that's worth, honoring by inducting him into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. These are all people that I normally vote for that are around. Morris Siegel, a longtime Houston wrestling promoter, promoted for probably like close to 50 years.
Yes. He's
Hugely, yeah.
it's a huge oversight that he's not in. So like
Well,
that's something
yeah,
that
I
needs to
mean,
be
I talked about
corrected.
this. I've talked about this with Dave before. Like Dave auto-inducted like Lou Darrow and I think one other guy, who were contemporaries of Morris Siegel. And and Dave's point was like, oh, Lou Darrow would never get the votes because he's from so long ago that he should put him in. And I'm like, well, shouldn't Morris Siegel get put in because he's like promoted at the same time? And Dave's like, he probably should, but he's been on the ballot, so I'm not going to take him off. So it's been a huge public outreach perspective. We have to get him in. He's building momentum though. He's got 48%. So. Um, Longtime Houston wrestling promoter, during a period where Houston was, and at certain times he was also the promoter for such a long period of time that business ebbed and flowed. But certainly around the World War II period, Houston was among the biggest wrestling territories in the country and therefore the world. Also helped pioneer like a lot of blood stuff. Danny McShane, who was kind of the guy who popularized blading, was a huge star. Um, for Morris Siegel. The Texas Death Match originated kind of in that territory. Um, just I don't know, like just one of those promoters that kind of probably should have been auto inducted in, but you
Like
can't get all of those guys at the in 1996. Dave did his best as he could, but
literally a successful promoter for over 40 years. Like it's 40 years. It's a
yeah.
very,
And
very
then
long time.
he passes that territory on to Paul Bosch, and the territory continues to be very successful, which Bosch is in the Hall of Fame. And like I don't know, that does that say anything that the territory continued to be successful after he left? Maybe, maybe not, but it also shows that he set up a really strong fundamental backbone for wrestling in Houston. And
Yeah, I mean,
that TV show was on the air for like 45 years.
and you can argue obviously the influence over Bosch as well.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Bosch was one of his big stars in the 40s. Anyway, I vote for him every year. Other people that I vote for every year that are still available, Grand Wizard, of course, who also, I will say this, he was also longtime manager for the Sheik, um, under Turban, as Prince, I can never remember, Farouk, maybe? That's his name? Farouka? I don't know. He's got some uh, Islamic name, despite the fact that he was a Jewish man. Uh, that was old time wrestling. I vote for him every year. Really long, successful career as a manager. Especially if you consider how big of a draw the Sheik was, and the Sheik never talked. So,
I
uh,
I vote for Grand Wizard as well.
mhm. And obviously, very memorable character too. A lot of people like I say this every year, but like a lot of people like my dad's age remember the Grand Wizard as like the guy who managed the guy Bruno Sammartino was wrestling that week. Um, I also vote for Roy Welsh, kind of like long, long time Tennessee promoter, um, kind of foundational figure in like Memphis wrestling and things like that. Um, and I also vote for George Scott, who of course was a longtime booker, had a major role in Mid-Atlantic and in the Carolinas, and also was a really pivotal player in the early rise of Hulkamania and WWE. That I think he should probably be in. Are there any other these guys that you vote for regularly before we talk about the new guys real quick?
Yeah, so I you already mentioned him. I also vote for Roy Welsh every
Yep.
year. So I'm hopeful he starts to gain some
He's building
momentum.
some momentum too. He's kind of like more Siegel, where it's like, you know what, if you more you think about it, this guy should probably be in. Um, Siegel had incredible longevity. Um, so our new guys, we have three announcers coming on. So we have Gorilla Monsoon, who's in as an announcer. Um, Has Gorilla been on the ballot before?
I'm not sure. I want to say yes. I can check pretty quickly.
Yeah. So Gorilla for me is a good example of a guy who is an important figure in wrestling. But being an announcer is just one part of like a life spent in pro wrestling and having an influence in pro wrestling. Um, so it's hard for me to like like just evaluating him as an announcer, not taking his in-ring career into perspective, you know, and his backstage roles. Like he's not a Hall of Famer, but like all these announcers, to be honest, they could all be in because it really depends on how much people like them. And I
Yeah.
guess how long they are. Like in his time, at least Observer readers did not like Gorilla Monsoon. He won many Worst Announcer awards. Um, but like he's just to me, he's not a Hall of Fame announcer, but he could be if you really liked Gorilla Monsoon.
Yeah, announcers are one of those things that really stir up emotions in people.
Yes.
Like they have like especially like announcers for different territories or different
Hmm.
time periods, right? Like if that was the sweet spot for like when you were a kid or a young person and that was like your favorite time in
Yeah,
wrestling,
people are
that
very passionate about Tony Schiavone and Dave Brown,
and
and
Mike Tenay, right? Like Mike Tenay as
yeah,
well. So yeah, I can see. We'll see how Gorilla was on the ballot before. He actually dropped for 1550.
yeah,
He was on until 2014. He
okay,
peaked at 49% in 2004.
yeah. So
Um,
is there more nostalgia for him?
potentially, potentially.
I mean, I'll say this about Gorilla, like a lot of the, especially if you're one, I'm not really one of these people, but a lot of people are. Like if you're one of those people that likes watching like, old WWF superstars and just kind of like these non-major shows from that era, like it's the WWF style is so like it's a lot of squash matches and stuff like that. A lot of it is carried by Gorilla Monsoon and whether it's him and Jesse Ventura or him and Bobby Heenan like interacting with each other. They're like the real stars of the show, uh, in a way.
That is absolutely true, and I'm one of those people that watches that stuff to fall asleep sometimes because it's just very relaxing. Like the rapport that they had, Gorilla had with both Bobby and Jesse, like it's just very, I don't know,
Yeah,
it's just
there's
very
never
relaxing and familiar.
yeah, I don't think I mean not saying this is like good or bad because like it's a part of it is because the wrestling is not very exciting. But I don't know if there's ever been a wrestling show that's like where like it almost feels like the main draw has been the announcers talking to each other, like it's a podcast, as opposed in wrestling is going on in the background. As opposed to like, most wrestling shows are built, even ones with very good announcers are built around like exciting action and the announcers calling the action. Um, Jesse Ventura's, I think, a stronger candidate as an announcer and someone that I'm going to consider voting for. Um, Again, this is for his work as an announcer, not his work as a wrestler and would-be union leader. Uh, I mean, there's probably someone that did this before, but like in terms of just being a heel announcer, Jesse perfected the art. Um, and
He was also the innovator of that too.
Yeah,
Like
I don't like saying that because like I'm sure someone like, well, actually, this person did heel work in the 70s. But yes, in a lot of ways, all these other heel announcers that are uh like around today, many of whom do a very bad job at it, are in a lot of ways imitating both Jesse Ventura and or Bobby Heenan.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And Jesse, uh, and so obviously a lot of guys did that poorly, right?
Yes, it's been a
But
crutch for a long time. Is this negative historical influence?
well, so I'm of the opinion that you shouldn't blame the person who
Yes,
was
yeah.
innovative and did something really well. That you can't blame him
Yeah.
for a bunch of hacks copying it and
Giving
doing
us
it
the
poorly.
JBL calling Brian Danielson a flying farm animal
Y-
is because of Jesse Ventura. And don't say it's not because it is.
I mean, that's fair. One interesting thing I'll throw out with Jesse is just his history on the ballot. So he also fell off because of 1550. And so him and Gorilla are both back now because like they're in the historical section now. Previously they were just in the modern section, right? So it's a different region. Same thing with Grand Hamada he fell off from 1550 in Japan. Now he's on in Mexico. But Jesse is the guy who got the closest to getting in without getting in. Like in 2004, he was at 59%,
Yeah.
2005, 58%, 2012, 59%. And then he has a few other years there where he's over 50. And if you go back and look at the ballots in those years, like a lot of them were stacked. Just so many different, like really strong candidates on. So it's understandable, like maybe why he didn't quite get in then, but I'm gonna vote for him this year, and I hope he gets a lot of traction and gets in eventually because
I expect
he
him to do
deserves
well.
it.
I expect him to do well, and I think, the thing that separates him from so many of these other imitators over the years is that Jesse was extremely good at siding with the heels, coming across as a heel, but maintaining consistent credibility and not burying the baby faces. A
Yeah,
lot of the people that do it in a much lazier way do so by, they bury the baby faces and they side with the heels, which is like the easiest thing to do. Jesse always did a great job. Like, and obviously he was a long-standing like foe of Hogan, but he never stooped to like losing his credibility with the audience in terms of like he would give Hogan plenty of credit for different things as a heel commentator. But was a master of getting in that like he's doing 75% straight, 25% shtick. That 25% shtick of the heel act, getting in that appropriately was something that a lot of people just haven't been able to do. Don Callis is the only one right now who I feel like actually does a good job at that.
yeah, and Don, it was funny when you were talking about like kind of the copycats of like
Yes.
Jesse Ventura and Bobby Heenan who came after him shortly thereafter. Like I thought of like, oh yeah, there are a lot of bad copycats, but then I was just thinking about like Don Callis and his like I think it's an immortal line, or at least it is to me. That goddamn drop kick during the Okada Omega matches. Yeah, just an amazing line, like
My,
perfect
you wanna know
timing
my
on it.
favorite Don Callis line is, and it's very subtle. But it's just like it shows me how good of a commentator he is, and it's something Jesse Ventura would have said, which is he was Don Callis. This is like probably like 6 months ago. Don was doing commentary during a Brody King Lance Archer match, and uh, they go outside the ring. They're brawling outside the ring, and Don is like, "Oh, the referee's got to get him back into the ring." And Excalibur Tony goes, "Oh, the referee, he's doing his 10 count." And then like Don just goes, "Do you know how much damage a man like Brody King can do in 10 seconds?" And it was such a great line because Don is playing the heel, right? He's protesting that these guys are fighting outside the ring, which is something every wrestling does, and Don comes across like a sore loser. But he's also just putting over how dangerous the babyface is. And it's so small, like I'm probably like the only one that noticed it, but I just thought it was a great line and indicative of like what makes a good heel announcer, as opposed to just being a guy who whines all the time and sides with the heels, which just seems like what so many people do. Um, So that's Jesse, and then the last guy is Bill Mercer, who just died this most recent year. I was doing some research on him earlier. So he's on here because he was the announcer for World Class during like the peak Von Erich years in the mid '80s, but doesn't seem to have a particularly long pro wrestling announcing career. He did a lot of sports casting in the Dallas area, and called, Dallas Cowboys games early on in their existence and Texas Ranger games early on in their existence and different college sports in Texas and the Dallas area. So he's like kind of like an important broadcaster in Texas and obviously was the voice during, peak WCCW. So I'm sure we've all heard him call many matches. But to me is not a Hall of Fame level announcer.
Yeah, he's one of those guys who like if people were watching him during that time, they
Yes, there
probably
are
have
probably some people that are like, oh, Bill Mercer, he was my favorite.
yeah, but if you weren't, then you're probably not going to necessarily think of him that way. But even just like, and that goes even like Bob Caudle, like he was
Yeah.
only at 70% last year, so he's not like close to getting in or anything. But like when I went back and watched some wrestling from promotions he announced, I was like, this guy's really good. I was like,
Yeah.
man, Bob Caudle's great. So like, if Bob Caudle got in someday, I'm not going to be upset about that. Hell, if like a bunch of these people get in, I might vote for Bob Caudle eventually. But it's just like there's just a lot of these non-wrestlers. It's like, man, a
Yeah.
lot of
And
them were very good at their
yeah.
jobs.
It's what's interesting with the announcers is that like because of WWE's dominance, there hasn't been a ton of like room for good announcers to pop up. And like WWE over the last 25 years has either been Jim Ross in and out of the company, Michael Cole, who I don't think is ever going to get in the Wrestling Hall Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame, and then like a lot of people that they had for a little bit and then got rid of that are like ultimately in the grand scheme of things kind of forgettable. So almost all of these announcers that we're talking about, I guess with the exception of maybe Shivani and Tony Schiavone or Mike Tenay, are like wrestlers from the territory era, like from a long time ago. Like Bill Mercer died at age 99 this year. Like there's not like a lot of new announcers gonna appear on this ballot. Like maybe one day Excalibur appears on this ballot. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, I mean,
It's been a hard industry to like have like a lot of longevity in.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I think a lot of that just has to do with the unstableness of the promotions that aren't WWE.
Hmm.
I mean, I guess although TNA, like
Yeah, like
TNA called TNA
yeah,
forever.
Tenay and Don West were a team for a while, and
Yeah, that's
um,
true. That's true. But yeah, to your point, like outside of Michael Cole, like WWE just turns people over like constantly. And then, because there's like a lot of other promotions are kind of unstable. So like they have a lot of people coming and going as well. So yeah, this could be like maybe if AEW's around another like, 20 years and Excalibur's the announcer that whole time, maybe he shows up. But yeah, there's not a lot of people I anticipate. I'm sure Michael Cole will get added to the ballot eventually, but no, absolutely not. Just absolutely. And the reason I say absolutely not, it's not even like oh, you don't like WWE type thing. Because I watched WWE for most of like regularly
Michael
for
Cole is like the voice of my childhood wrestling.
yeah, it's just
Yeah,
when Michael, because like when Jim Ross they would get rid of Jim Ross, it would be like, oh, I miss Jim Ross, right? When Michael Cole wasn't announcing a show, you were never like, oh, I miss Michael Cole. Like I've never had that experience. So
yeah.
like I'm not saying he's bad, but I don't it's just
Oh,
not a
he's
Hall of
very
Fame
bad.
candidate.
I
Okay,
dislike
fair
him
enough.
greatly. And what stands out to
Yeah.
me now when I watch WWE infrequently as I do is how bad the commentary is. It's not all Michael Cole's fault, and a lot of it has to do with how they're produced and what they're told to say. It's not as personal as maybe make it out to be, but
My
uh,
my
you,
favorite Michael Cole memory of recent vintage, oh wow, I can't believe I just did that. Was when Tama Tonga first showed up. He like just went to Cage Match and looked at like who Tama Tonga's like most recent matches were. And I think he said like, oh yeah, battles against like he said Carl Anderson, because remember they had that program for like one of the belts. He said Carl Anderson. I can't remember who else he said, but one of them was evil. I'm like, what was the Tomatonga Evil program and like great matches against Evil? And then I just looked at Cage Match and was like, yep, okay, this is just what he did. He just looked at like what his most recent
well, also
singles
like
matches were.
any WWE fan that needs you to explain who doesn't know who Tamatanga is, like is not going to know who Evil is.
Yeah, that's what made it even funnier
Like
because
Carl
like
Anderson, like okay, that's someone that's been on a lot of WWE
yes,
television. That makes sense to explain.
yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, he called out Carl Anderson. There was someone I think who was on AEW that Cole purposefully left out of that.
Yeah.
But then it was just funny that Evil was one of the names that he picked. I'm like, oh yeah, all the New Japan
I
fans have
mean,
fond
you can
memories
easily
of the
pronounce.
Tamatonga
You're
Evil
not gonna.
matches.
I mean, you can easily pronounce his name.
That's true.
Yeah.
That might have been, I think you might have just solved it. Thank you for solving that for me because up to
Yeah.
now I was
Yeah, if you're
perplexed.
just looking through Cage Match real quick and you're like, ah, shit, I gotta say one of these names, like, ah, Carl Anderson, okay, that's easy to say. And like, well, I don't think I'm gonna be able to say, like, I don't know, who Kosei Fujita, just to throw out a name. Did you know that Bill Mercer's granddaughter is the play-by-play announcer for the Portland Sea Dogs?
Really?
That's what his Wikipedia says.
Wow. Okay. For those who don't know, the Portland Sea Dogs are the Red Sox AA affiliate in Portland, Maine, where I lived for a very long time.
Yeah, this is the second time we're talking about Portland.
I've
Well, that
I've
first one was actually off air, but
I went to a number of Sea Dogs games.
yeah, they got the main monster. It's like the same. It's like a replica of the green monster out there.
It's a good time. Good time.
Anyway, Adam, you want anything else? We have to end this because it's going to tip over 3 hours, and then Rich is going to yell at me.
The only other thing I'll add is just I will have a Hall of Fame column coming out on the modern candidates. Not sure exactly when it'll be, but sometime over the next few weeks. So yeah, please check that out at Voices of Wrestling.
All right. I want to thank Adam. I want to thank everyone for listening to our show, and I'll talk to you again after a while.
Hey kids, Jeff Hawkins from Shake Them Ropes here, and for almost 15 years we have been part of Voices of Wrestling. Myself and Chris Novembrino give a review of that week's news, the lazy river of wrestling criticism of that week's WWE and AEW, and then Vader Club, where we watch something from one of our past, or something we may have missed. Smart, snarky, and sometimes serious, but not always. That's us, and if that's your vibe, we'd love to have you listen to Shake Them Ropes every week on the Voices of Wrestling podcasting network.
Do you like wrestling trivia? Then check out the 5-Star Match Game, the Pro Wrestling Quiz Show. I'm Joe Gagney, and every episode, I grill 3 contestants with 5 rounds of power-packed wrestling trivia. We have over 30 evergreen episodes in the archives covering WWE, AEW, Japan, Mexico, and much, 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 much more. Play along at home and check it out today.